My grandfather is the Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 101 Rain and Snow. When Anna Katerina was forced to get up this morning, she had an irresistible urge. She wanted to beat someone up, but several maids pressed her to change into a new dress. Then she couldn't help but stuffed her into the carriage. She saw her godmother Alexandra Fedorovna, wife of Nicholas I. "Oh, my cute little Nana, you are hope." Alexandra Fedorovna hugged the trembling little girl and whispered in her ear. "Little Nana? You are young. You obese old woman, don't use the fat on your chest to press me. I can't breathe," Anna Katerina complained in her heart, but on the surface she was still respectful to the queen. "You were also knocked unconscious by the gun, weren't you? You were unconscious for 2 hours before you woke up, which scared everyone. You, kid, you can brag about this. I really admire you, and why don't you let Olga and Yevna go for such a good thing? I heard that the Habsburg family in Austria are all ugly. I have seen the portraits in books." Queen Sandra was a little helpless and took out a painting. The little girl's eyes lit up. "Oh my God, he is so handsome. And, please introduce him to me." Franz was still quite handsome when he was a child. "You kid, really?" Although Anna said this, what she was thinking in her heart was, if I meet the culprit who woke me up, I will slap him in the face with my dancing shoes. Obviously, Miss Anna's irritability after getting up has not subsided. The carriage was moving at full speed. Under the warm autumn sun, magnificent buildings appeared in front of her. But she was not the only one who came here. Mira Jane was selected to the Royal Ballet Academy at the age of 7. She is 13 years old this year. She had a sweet and dignified look and a slender figure. She had imagined countless times that she would be wearing a dance dress and taking an excited bow on the stage, surrounded by a crowd of people, thunderous applause, and countless flowers. Just a month ago, the school teacher Polly, a 22-year-old old girl, at that time, those who were not married after 18 were considered old girls, found her. She said that a big shot wanted to see her, and Mira Jane didn't like it because the girls who had contact with big shots were taken away and never came back, and the parents didn't ask. Although Mira Jane was reluctant, she had no right to refuse. She met Duke Liubey in a small dark room, a real power figure in Russia. Her father was only a low-ranking civil servant, but he still knew the legend about this big shot. Duke Liubey was a close confidant of Tsar Nicholas I. He was the head of the Russian Special Third Department and had the power of life and death over all Russian officials. He was the eyes and ears of Nicholas I. Duke Liubey's voice was low and hoarse, like the sound of a long-used sawtooth. "Good evening, Miss Mira Jane. I've seen your performance and it's very good. Now the country needs you to replace Anna, the daughter of Fedorovich, who can't attend. You need to try your best to leave a good impression on the visiting Grand Duke Franz. This is very important for the country." Mira Jane was very reluctant. Her wish was to be a dancer of the Russian Royal Ballet. Why should she please a foreign Grand Duke like a streetwalker now? But she couldn't refuse Duke Liubey's words. There are many girls like Mira Jane. After all, Russia is too big. Many girls of the right age cannot come to St. Petersburg, but no family wants to miss such an opportunity. After all, this is not only to be loyal to His Majesty the Tsar, but also to the family. Voivodina, Nordsovy Fortress. There was a drizzle in the sky, and Stoikovich knelt there. He knew that there were several guns on the city wall aiming at him, and if he made any move, someone would shoot him. But even if he didn't move, the other party might still shoot. After all, prisoners still need to be guarded, and dead people are not a threat. At this moment, his life and death depended on someone else's thoughts. He didn't like this feeling. He just hoped that the person could aim a little when shooting, and it would be best if he could finish it with one shot. If he hit his hand or leg, it would be too tragic. When he and his comrades killed prisoners in the past, they always let the prisoners run first and then shot. Some unlucky prisoners were shot 4 or 5 times but didn't die. They screamed in pain and asked others to kill him. Now it was his turn. "Hey! Does the kneeling guy want to eat something and drink some wine?" The defenders on the city wall shook half a bottle of wine and a few pieces of black bread. The people on the city wall were Croatians, and the two sides could communicate with each other. "I surrender. How do I get up?" Although Stoikovich wanted to curse these damn Croatian bastards, his life was more important. Even if he wanted to run, the gentle slope was too high for him. If he wanted to attack the city, he had better forget it. Get lost. Who wants you to come up here? What's the use of you? Who has time to watch over you? Look at these corpses to see if there are any good things on them. Put them all in this basket. We will give you wine and bread. We won't shoot you unless you resist. Go away at night. The Croatians on the wall lowered the basket. Austria is a Catholic country and stealing corpses is a serious crime, punishable by hanging. But there is no rule that the enemy cannot steal corpses. Usually, officers will turn a blind eye, as long as they don't do it too much and don't get caught by those nobles who are bossing around. But this time, the commander of the troops is a royal Grand Duke. God knows if he will kill everyone he sees. Stojkovic certainly understood what was going on. The armies of this era were extremely poor. The military pay was deducted layer by layer, and there was not much money left for ordinary soldiers. But with food provided, it is a good place for those who can't afford to live. But for Croatians who make a living as soldiers, there are still ways to make money. Stealing corpses is a good way, and of course they also set up checkpoints and rob. The most valuable thing for corpse robbers is not the property on the corpse, nor the weapons. Because people who go to the battlefield rarely bring valuables, and weapons have to be handed over, so it is not their turn. Unless the weapons are rotten to a certain extent, or if they meet an officer who is kind. There is one thing that is the most valuable on the corpse, and the officers dare not touch it. That is the teeth of the corpse. Dentures in this era are usually made of human teeth, and where do these human teeth come from? There are not many stupid women like Fantine and Les Miserables who sell teeth. The main source is the corpses on the battlefield. For example, the famous Waterloo teeth in history are the masterpieces of the corpse robbers. Of course, they dare not do it this time. Stojkovic was also fortunate that it was daytime. Otherwise, he would most likely have to take pliers, pry open the mouth of the dead and do those disgusting and dirty jobs. Stojkovic turned over the corpses one by one with his hands and feet, and soon filled the basket. He hung the basket on the rope hook with trepidation, and he did not dare to look at it. Because he was afraid that the other party would break his promise and take the opportunity to kill him. But even if the other party killed him, the other party would have no psychological burden. Whether it is killing an enemy or killing a corpse thief, it is reasonable and legal. Fortunately, the defenders on the city wall kept the promise, and the basket was lowered again, which contained half a bottle of liquor and a bottle of beer, 3 pieces of black bread and half a bitten sausage. Obviously, the people on the city wall were very satisfied with this harvest. Take the things and go quickly, stay away from the city wall, the defenders on the city wall shouted. Stojkovic felt very cold, and it was still raining, so he didn't want to catch a cold. The mortality rate of colds in this era is very high, and colds can kill people. Can you give me a blanket? The latest novels are first published on the 6th-9th book bar. The guards on the wall curled their lips and said, "Young master of the Serbian army, why do you still want to fight when you have so many things to do? Isn't it good to enjoy yourself at home? Why do you have to come here to die? Our reinforcements have arrived, and it is estimated that tomorrow will be the day of your death. I give you a piece of advice, if you run away, don't go back to your barracks. I am a peasant who was forced to do this. I don't want to fight. I have never killed anyone. My mother is Croatian. If I didn't come here, they would burn my house." Stojkovic made up nonsense. "Damn, these beasts. Here is a blanket for you. At night, you can walk 600 meters east and there is a gap to climb up. Don't come back." This time, the basket contained a blanket and a pot of hot ginger soup. Obviously, the soldiers on the wall were touched. Stojkovic sat in a corner under the gentle slope wrapped in a blanket, silently eating the food earned by hard work. He was a little homesick, missing his parents and that ugly wife. Stojkovic's family had more than 30 acres of land, and their life was pretty good. Generally speaking, 5 mu of land in this era can feed a person, and more than 10 mu of land in Ireland, where only potatoes are grown and people are used to hunger, can feed a family. But he felt that such a life was too boring, and decided to join the army with a few ruffians in the village to kill people for fun. At that time, the Serbian new army was expanding, and he experienced a different life in the barracks. And the ideal of Greater Serbia described by the officers deeply attracted him. He felt that it was the goal of his life. As long as he could establish the kingdom of Greater Serbia, he would not hesitate even if he was torn to pieces, but now he just wanted to go home to see his family. Valjevic looked at the map in front of him, and he finally believed that the three-way division of Austria was false. Because Austrian reinforcements were coming in a steady stream, he also got news that Russia would also send a large army to suppress Serbia. There is no doubt that Serbia was abandoned. Russia was unwilling to give up the three emperors' alliance with Austria, nor did it want Serbia to fall into the hands of Austria. Then the best way was to get ahead of the Austrians and achieve military occupation of Serbia. Now that he is the culprit, neither Austria nor Russia will let him go. He can only die gloriously as a soldier now, and these Serbian soldiers should be proud of it. Because they will create miracles with their greatest general. Tomorrow, Valjevic is going to launch a frontal attack on Archduke Karl's camp. He wants to create a brilliant victory at the last moment. Prove that he has the talent that is not inferior to Napoleon. In today's battle, the Serbian army lost more than 10,000 people, but it is unknown how many were killed, because there are still those who pretended to be dead and fled everywhere. On the other hand, Archduke Karl's reinforcements and supplies are also constantly arriving. Including his son Albrecht and the city defense forces of Vienna, another 8,000 Austrian soldiers arrived at the front through the Danube. It's just that Archduke Karl was very angry with the troops led by his son. Why did this group of second-generation ancestors come to the battlefield? For a picnic. The reason why the Vienna city defense force appeared on the battlefield was because of their glorious victory in Bohemia before. They came to win the battle. Albrecht was also helpless. These bastards went home to lobby their relatives. Everyone in the Vienna city defense army, who doesn't have some officials in their family? So this second-generation ancestor army successfully went to the front line. Arriving with the Vienna city defense army, there were also elite troops from Salzburg. They looked at these troops composed of noble children and found it a bit funny. They looked at the Serbian army on the opposite side and felt that this war was a bit funny. At night, Jalacic's follow-up troops also rushed to the vicinity of Nordsavi. But they did not enter the city, but received an order from Archduke Karl. Tomorrow, launch a general attack on the Serbian army and defeat the invading enemy on the front battlefield. In fact, frontal combat in Assyria is not as cruel as siege warfare. Because frontal combat usually ends when the loss exceeds 20%, while siege warfare is often a situation of life and death. And counting Jalacic's 20,000 reinforcements, Archduke Karl has enough capital to fight a battle with the Serbian army. Another thing is that the performance of the Serbian army is really worrying, especially the command during the attack and retreat is very chaotic. Then there's the order from Vienna, ordering him to end the battle before the Russians send troops. Russia must not be allowed to get involved, giving the Russians a reason to interfere. At the same time, a brilliant victory must be achieved, and a loud victory must be won to deter the scoundrels who are eyeing Austria, Prussia, Sardinia, France, so Archduke Karl, as a defensive general, had to take the initiative to attack. However, those who know Archduke Karl will not worry about this, because he is good at defense and he is also good at offense. Chapter 102, Decisive Battle, 1. Edmüller was a little upset. What was going on? How could an army of 30,000 be defeated? And wasn't it agreed that Austria would be divided among the three? Why did Archduke Karl come? Archduke Karl was a mythical existence in the military circles of the Austrian Empire. Although he had never met Archduke Karl in person, every student in the Austrian Imperial Military Academy would read his works. He knew that Archduke Karl was a general who would not fight a battle without confidence. Once he took action, it would be unstoppable like a tsunami. It was time to escape. Kirimi would definitely report what he had done. If he stayed in the Serbian army, he might die in the chaos. He really didn't think that these temporarily organized Serbs could face the elite troops of the Austrian Empire head-on. Although he would not be worried about his life if he returned to Austria now, he was afraid that his future would be ruined. If he still wanted to achieve something, he should go to Britain. The British Empire is the most powerful country in the world now, and it will definitely give him opportunities and a stage. It's just that it's harder than climbing to the sky for a person who just surrendered to escape from the barracks. Edmüller was caught before he ran out of the barracks, and Valjevic claimed that he would use Edmüller, the traitor, as a sacrifice. 1 hour before Edmüller was arrested. General Orva, we have no way out. There are 40,000 Austrian troops in front of us. Retreating at this time is tantamount to seeking death. Milos's butcher knife has been sharpened, waiting for us to go back and admit defeat. He will have an excuse to wipe out the remnants of the 17-member parliament, Valjevic said earnestly. Valjevic, you actually killed General Tasevich. The war was obviously over, but you still insisted on fighting Austria. Do you know how many people died because of your wrong decision? The three-party division of Austria is a scam, and we have all been deceived. Orva's face was pale, like a rag that had been washed many times. We have no way out. If we surrender now, even if the Austrians don't kill us, Milos will not let us go when we return home. So many people have died. Even if we surrender to Milos, he will find someone to take the blame. And we are his best choice. Valjevic has executed several groups of envoys sent by Milos to persuade them to surrender. Then what else can we do? The Austrians have gathered nearly 40,000 troops. The leader is Archduke Karl, whom you always wanted to meet. Are you satisfied now? Orva mocked. Austria has nearly 40,000 troops, but we still have 45,000. Moreover, the Austrian army is scattered, and Archduke Karl's main force is less than 20,000. What are you going to do? Do you want to rush straight to Archduke Karl's camp? How many people died when we attacked the Nordsavy fortress? Can't you see? You are simply a lunatic. We can't win, Orva said this, but still hoped to find a glimmer of hope. It's hard to say. How can we know without trying? As commanders, if you and I were defeated and returned home, or surrendered after being beaten to pulp, the result would definitely be death. But as long as we can win a battle, we can negotiate with the Austrians. As long as we can make the Austrians feel that the cost of fighting is greater than the cost of negotiation, we can surrender with dignity, and then join Austria or seek political asylum in other countries. Political asylum, yes, we can go to France, Britain, the Kingdom of Sardinia, or Spain. In short, someone will be willing to provide us with asylum, but first we have to win this battle. Only when we hurt them will they negotiate with us, Valjevich said firmly. Can't we negotiate directly? While we still have so many troops, the Austrians don't want to fight, right? Orva is more inclined to negotiate now. Negotiate now? Don't forget, we are invaders. I have sent envoys, but they were all rejected by the Austrians. They want us to pay a price for the so-called imperial dignity. Valjevich acted helpless. Damn it, it's all your fault, you bastard. Why are you in such a hurry to take action? We can completely avoid entering Austrian territory and conducting any infiltration operations. Now, the Austrians refuse our surrender and want to wipe Serbia off the map. Orva was very pessimistic. Don't worry, Serbia will continue to exist because of His Majesty the Tsar. Go to His Majesty the Tsar. Where was he when we were fighting Nordsavy? If it weren't for his envoy, how could we attack the Austrian Empire? The Tsar has abandoned us. It's not His Majesty the Tsar. There is someone else who fooled us. If Serbia is annexed by Austria, it will not be in the strategic interests of His Majesty the Tsar, let alone the interests of the Great Slavic Alliance. What's the point of saying all this now? If I had listened to Tasevich at the beginning, it would have been great. Listen carefully. Tomorrow I need you to block the Austrian army in the direction of Nordsavy. I will lead all my troops to fight a decisive battle with Archduke Karl. As long as I win, I guarantee that you and your people can leave safely. If I lose, it won't be too late for you to surrender then. Well, I'll only give you 5 hours. If you can't take it, I'll surrender. Orva finally made up his mind. It's a deal. Valjevic acted very open-minded. The latest novel is published on 69 Shuba. On the second day, the Serbian army was divided into two parts. One part, led by Orva, had 15,000 people and blocked the reinforcements from Nordsavy, including the Nordsavy garrison and the Croatian army. The other part, with 30,000 people, marched directly to Archduke Karl's camp. When the two armies were on the verge of a war, two small boats carrying dozens of people and some property were floating down the Danube. It was too late to go home, so I updated a little temporarily. I will update more tomorrow. Chapter 103, Decisive Battle, 2. Captain, your wound is bleeding again, the chaplain said. Tighten it, it's okay. It's a bone again, but it won't kill you. It's far from the heart. Captain Hans was stabbed in the shoulder yesterday, which looked very scary. But in fact, the injury was not serious, he just fainted on the spot due to excessive fatigue. Lieutenant Manchel next door was not so lucky. Because the wound had not been treated for a long time and he continued to participate in the battle. Now the doctors had to cut off 1/3 of his buttocks. In order to complete the operation, the doctors gave Lieutenant Manchel nearly a liter of strong liquor mixed with mandrake juice. His limbs were fixed to 4 wooden stakes with ropes, and one of the strongest soldiers pressed on him and pressed his head. The scene was like slaughtering a pig. May God bless you." After the chaplain finished praying, the doctor and nurse finally entered the scene. A towel was stuffed into Manchel's mouth, and then the doctors took out the shining scalpel. Waves of screams were terrifying. Lieutenant Manchel screamed louder than those soldiers who were shot. The surgery at this time was no different from slow slicing, especially this large-scale surgery was almost certain to kill. There are many kinds of death, and this kind of slow torture to death is undoubtedly the most painful. Of course, as long as you are strong enough to survive, you will still be a good man in a few months. It's just that it may leave a lifelong shadow. Manchel, you have to hold on. I'll go and beat a few more Serbian devils to avenge you. Captain Hans couldn't bear to watch this bloody scene and ran out. Several soldiers who wanted to escape from the battlefield by self-mutilation were a little scared when they saw this scene. Looking at the bloody knife in the doctor's hand and the meat on the tray, they couldn't help but feel their stomachs churning. At this time, an assistant wearing a mask and holding a thick hemp rope came over and said, "Who is the next one? Who needs treatment?" In the eyes of these soldiers, the other party was as terrible as a plague doctor in the Middle Ages. The words in his mouth seemed to be the whisper of the god of death. After Captain Hans ran out of the door, these soldiers also ran out with strange cries. "Come back, don't give up treatment, there will always be hope." The assistant chased out a few steps and returned. "Doctor, what happened to them?" The military doctor was experienced. "Don't worry about them, they are just a bunch of cowards. Let's continue to treat them." The sound of a knife cutting flesh and blood came from the house. In the Serbian military camp, Stojkovic was bragging to others about how he fought with the Austrian defenders under the city for a day and a night. Then he successfully used the Austrian artillery to blast a gap for himself on the gentle slope. In fact, Stojkovic successfully found the gap last night according to the guidance of the defenders on the city. But he lost his way at night and was finally met by the Serbian patrol. He had to return to the military camp again. In order not to be ridiculed and not to be sent as cannon fodder, he made up this lie. Only 2 people survived the entire vanguard camp that climbed the Nordsavi city wall. He and Old Joe, including the Montenegrin mercenaries, were the only 2 who survived. Everyone knows the legend about Old Joe, so it is not surprising that Old Joe can come back alive. The guy in front of him was said to be just a little scoundrel. He might have surrendered to the Austrians and returned to be an insider. At this time, the only person who could help Stojkovic was Old Joe. Enough, you shouldn't doubt our compatriots like this. Being able to come back alive from such a battlefield and return to the barracks proves that his courage is far beyond that of ordinary people, Old Joe said loudly. Stojkovic was very moved, but he didn't want to come back. Climbing up the gentle slope at night, he thought he should make another fortune before ending his military career. As a result, it was too dark, and he encountered a patrol while searching for corpses along the way. If he didn't brag to them, he would be treated as a deserter. "Old Joe, I heard that you jumped down from the wall of Nordsavi. Tell us, are those Austrians cruel?" Several soldiers came over to listen to the story. "You will meet them on the battlefield today. I hope you don't wet your pants. The Austrians are a group of cruel demons. I have seen them take out the intestines of prisoners and cook soup," an officer who is responsible for pre-war mobilization said. "Stop talking, the Austrians are not pigs, and even if they are pigs, they won't eat your shit," a group of soldiers who were tired of hearing inflammatory speeches retorted. This kind of officer in charge of pre-war mobilization would only say a few words. "The enemy is a devil, and our general is a genius. And there is a real hero who has survived countless battles in front of him." The soldiers wanted to hear what he had to say. "The Austrians are just like us, no one wants to go to the battlefield. If there is no war, I would like to have a drink with them." Old Joe changed the subject. "But we are soldiers, and obeying orders is our duty. The Austrians have better weapons and stronger combat effectiveness than us. But we will not surrender, because there are tens of thousands of Serbian compatriots behind us. We will not retreat, and we cannot retreat." The soldiers were very moved, but they were still very depressed. Because the information pieced together from the infiltration troops, militia, and the speeches of several siege teams showed that the Austrian army was very strong, and many of them would die in the battle with the Austrian army. The troops gathered, and the Serbian soldiers were exhausted. This pre-war mobilization was very brief. "Serbian warriors, we have twice the number of enemy troops, we will definitely win this battle. Serbia will win, long live the great Slavic Empire." Rows of soldiers marched towards the battlefield with heavy steps and guns. Looking at the rows of soldiers passing by, a general asked, "Where's Marshal Valjevic?" The Austrians did not wait for us to attack, they are also lining up as if they are ready to fight a field battle with us. Valjevic's adjutant, the marshal, led the reserve troops to hold the line. The marshal said that the real victory or defeat depends on the reserve troops of both sides. Our task is to consume the Austrian spirit as much as possible. As long as we can hold the Austrians back, they will collapse when the reserve troops appear. This tactic was used by the Serbian New Army when pacifying domestic warlords, and it was very effective. Every time, the opponent's surrender can be exchanged for a very small price. Even if the opponent's commander does not surrender, their soldiers will help him surrender. The general's face was heavy. The Austrian soldiers will not collapse so easily. The enemy's commander is a famous general who once defeated Emperor Napoleon and is also the spokesperson of the Austrian royal family. Even for the sake of face, they will fight to the death. War is about strategy, and their strategy is outdated. Artillery bombardment, infantry charge, cavalry flank attack, this tactic is outdated. Your ancestors once shed blood with Prince Eugen, now bleed with me, Archduke Karl said to the soldiers before the war. On the battlefield, the artillery that Archduke Karl needed was finally delivered. It was a new rifled cannon successfully developed in 1839. In 1846, the Italians developed a breech-loading rifled cannon, which was faster, more accurate and lighter to load, and this field cannon was completely thrown into the garbage heap. Although it was rotten, it was better than nothing. The firepower of this M1839 rifled cannon was not as good as the French M1841 Napoleon cannon, later, and its accuracy was not as good as the rifled cannon of the same period, but it had an advantage of an ultra-long range. Although this thing has insufficient firepower, the soldiers of the Serbian army are generally of low quality and low morale. When facing this kind of ultra-long range attack, they look very embarrassed. With the sound of military drums, the Austrian soldiers also lined up and went to the battlefield. The only difference is that the music this time is Prince Eugen's March, which is also in the Eastern Expedition. It's just that this time it's not the Ottomans who are fighting, but the Serbs. Albrecht rode a horse and followed his Vienna city defense army. He just hoped that this group would not be scared to pee the pants and run away. In fact, he didn't have to go to the battlefield, but because of his father-son relationship with Archduke Karl, he didn't want to listen to gossip and took the initiative to ask to be with his soldiers. These city defense troops were in the second batch of the attacking team, because putting this group of second-generation ancestors on the front line, God knows whether they will collapse on the battlefield. Once the frontline soldiers collapse, how much adverse impact will it have on the entire war? No one knows. However, these city defense soldiers felt that they were underestimated and protested. But they were not qualified to cause trouble in Archduke Karl's army. They just pulled out dozens of troublemakers, gave each of them 20 lashes and expelled them from the army, and they behaved. The Serbians gathered heavy troops on the right, and Archduke Karl directly ordered all artillery to aim at the Serbian heavy troops. Are you going to use the oblique attack tactic? It's just too obvious. Tell the cavalry to gather on the enemy's left wing. Let Albrecht take his group of second-generation rich kids to the left wing, and don't embarrass yourself on the right. The concentrated fire of the Austrian artillery was terrible. Although not many people died, it was a heavy blow to the Serbian heavy troops. Have the Austrians discovered our combat purpose? They are sending reinforcements to the left wing. Are they also going to use the oblique attack tactic to do the opposite? What should we do? The Austrian army is approaching us. Go and call Marshal Valjevic. In fact, the Serbian army's judgment was correct. Archduke Karl took advantage of the situation and strengthened the left wing to prepare to attack the weak left wing of the Serbian army. Archduke Karl also had another purpose in doing this, which was to draw out the Serbian army's reserve. 300 meters. Skirmishers, step out and let these Serbs know what pain is, the Austrian officer shouted. Suddenly, a row of bullets came over, and many soldiers in the Serbian army fell down. Some of them were officers. The Austrian skirmishers were targeting these Serbian officers, but shooting from such a distance was still prone to deviation. The latest novels are first published on the 69th book bar. Facing the harassment of the Austrian skirmisher line, Serbia also sent skirmishers to fight back, but the number was too different. The number of Austrian skirmishers was 10 times that of the Serbian army, and there was even a special hunting battalion. 200 meters. The brigade stopped marching and prepared to meet the enemy. The Serbian officer shouted. The Austrian queue had already walked to nearly 150 meters, and finally these improvised peasants could not bear it anymore. One person pulled the trigger, and the others couldn't help but pull the trigger. This sporadic shooting soon turned into a spree of random shooting. Some people aimed at the skirmishers in front, some aimed at the infantry of the large group, and some just fired a shot at random. As a result, not many people fell in the Austrian ranks. It was far less than the number of people shot and killed by the Austrian skirmishers, but the result of such random shooting was that the Austrians could continue to march without scruples. The Austrian officers also saw the opportunity. "March quickly, don't shoot," the Serbian officers shouted at the top of their lungs. "Reload quickly, the Austrians are coming. Quick! Quick! Quick!" At this time, the Austrian hunters opened fire again. They were all equipped with rifled guns and were excellent shooters. After a round of bullets, the Serbian army in the front row was cleared out, and almost all the skirmishers were killed. In addition to the baptism of artillery fire, some soldiers were on the verge of collapse, but they still hurriedly opened the gunpowder bags and put them into the barrels. While pounding the barrels, they looked at the approaching Austrian army column. 100 meters. "The Austrians are coming," an officer shouted. According to their test, the hit rate within 100 meters can reach nearly 40%, which is completely up to the shooting standard. The shooting accuracy within 50 meters is as high as 70%. At this time, the Austrian army was still on the march. Their goal was to launch a volley within 50 meters to directly break the morale of the Serbian army. The Serbian officers hoped that the Austrians would stand still before shooting, so that the Serbian army could gain the first-hand advantage. But I don't know who fired the first shot, and then the entire Serbian army fell into the frenzy of shooting. The result was better than the last time, and many Austrians were indeed knocked down. It's just that the Austrian officers were laughing at this time, and the Austrian soldiers seemed to have not seen their fallen companions. They raised their heads and looked forward, and even sang Prince Eugen's march with the music. Prince Eugen, a noble knight, want to help the emperor recapture Belgrade 50 meters away. The brigade stopped moving forward, raised their guns, aimed, and the first row fired, the Austrian officer shouted. A round of volleys at 50 meters, the horrific rain of bullets directly destroyed the psychological defense line of the Serbian army. And this is just the beginning. Second column, move forward, fire. Third column, move forward, fire. The Serbian soldiers and officers standing in the front row were almost cleared out. The soldiers behind, stained with the blood of their comrades, completely collapsed, although the Austrians had no bullets. But who knows what the Austrian army will do next, that is, hand-to-hand combat. Just when the Austrian officers were about to let the soldiers launch a bayonet charge, the Serbian army collapsed. This is different from what they practiced. The soldiers and officers looked at each other. What should they do? Load the bullets and continue to march slowly. The brothers of the city defense army behind couldn't stand it anymore. The Serbians collapsed after only a few people died. Why don't you charge? So a group of second-generation ancestors formed a square formation and accelerated the pace. Come back. Idiots. You are destroying the formation. You are committing suicide by rushing forward like this. Be your reserve troops. Albrecht came to the front of the army, pulled the reins of his horse, and raised his horse's hoof high. Although this group of second-generation rich people are domineering, they dare not be arrogant when facing someone of Albrecht's status, and can only retreat to their positions obediently. The hunters were very familiar with the escaped behavior of the Serbian army and immediately began to flank. The cavalry liked this kind of enemy who ran away after being hit, because people only have 2 legs, while their horses have 4 legs. Seeing that the Serbian left wing began to collapse, the cavalry immediately entered the field and began to harvest heads. Seeing that the oblique attack tactics did not work, the adjutant in command at the front ordered a full retreat to implement Plan B. Archduke Karl looked through the telescope at the Serbian army, which began to retreat only 20 minutes after the battle began, and thought to himself, any other tricks, slope tactics? Send the hussars to have a look. Thanks to the book Friend Leader for his Steel and Lonely Boy, Don 76 for his monthly ticket, and book Friend 20210806232711729 for his reward. Chapter 104, Decisive Battle, 3. When the bridge is attacked, we take up our guns and cross the Danube. Lyrics of the Prince Eugen March. The morale and discipline of both sides were not at the same level. The Serbian army in front of them often collapsed as soon as they came into contact. This made the Austrian officers feel very embarrassed, because the orders from above prohibited the infantry from pursuing the enemy. But it was really bad to watch the enemy escape without being able to beat them. The cavalry were very happy to chase the enemy northward. Before Archduke Karl's order was conveyed to the front line, Archduke Albrecht at the front ordered the cavalry not to cross the slope to pursue. Send some people to take a look behind the slope. The defeat of the Serbian army is so strange. Even the militia should not collapse so quickly. I suspect they are going to have a renaissance on the battlefield. We should not pursue, but continue to complete the oblique attack mission assigned by my father to encircle the enemy troops in front of the slope. Yes, Archduke Albrecht. You are worthy of being the biological son of Archduke Karl. From what I know about Archduke Karl, he will never march forward without finding out what is behind. At this time, a messenger arrived and said, Archduke Karl ordered not to pursue and to continue to complete the encirclement. The 2nd Hussar Regiment of Linz will conduct reconnaissance behind the enemy slope. I repeat again, no pursuit, continue to complete the encirclement. Haha, look. They are really father and son, the cavalry colonel laughed. Tell Archduke Karl that Archduke Albrecht thinks so too. The second-generation rich men in the surrounding city defense forces suddenly cheered. As expected of the boss, he actually saw through the Serbian conspiracy. Boss, give the order quickly. We are not afraid of anything, no matter how hard we try. These second-generation rich men are usually arrogant, but they will appear very humble when they meet stronger second-generation rich men. But Albrecht was not happy. He didn't know when he could get rid of the shadow of his father. Give an order? Give a shit. Attack according to the original plan to complete the encirclement. If anyone dares to take a step back when the fight starts, I guarantee that he will not be able to return to Vienna alive. This is a war, not an outing. Your family background is worthless here, so listen to me. In fact, the Vienna city defense forces are basically unlikely to fight a skirmish in this attack sequence. Unless all the regular troops in front are dead, it will be their turn. What they have to pay attention to is the shells that fall from the sky from time to time. So far, only a very small number of soldiers in the 3,000-man team have been injured by shells. The Serbian army was completely suppressed by the Austrian army, especially the rapid collapse of the left wing, which soon affected the entire battle situation. The Austrian soldiers almost pushed forward from left to right. The hunters began to attack the main force of the Serbian new army hiding behind the slope from the flank, and the cavalry advanced to the rear of the Serbian army, preparing to cut off the retreat of the Serbian army. The damn Austrians have seen through our tactics. What should we do? Where is Marshal Valjevic? What should we do now? Don't panic, it's only the Austrian hunters and cavalry who are coming. They dare not attack our phalanx. The Austrian soldiers suddenly appeared on the slope on the right and began to attack the flustered Serbian army. Didn't you say they didn't dare to come? Look, they have crossed the slope. We are surrounded, we are dead. Austrian soldiers began to appear on the slope from the right, and Austria had to use the oblique attack tactic for the second time. This time, the attack started from right to left, and the defensive focus of the Serbian army was on the left wing. Because the left wing collapsed first, it would naturally strengthen the strength of the left wing. However, the Austrian army's attack adopted the principle of proximity. After completing the encirclement on the right wing, they directly concentrated their forces to attack from the right side. The performance of the new Serbian army was not much better than that of the previous peasant army, and they could still hold up in the shooting. But when the Austrian army launched a bayonet charge, morale finally collapsed. There was a large-scale rout on the right wing of the new Serbian army, and the officers could not stop it with either guns or knives. There were even angry soldiers who started to attack officers directly. The Austrian army would not miss this opportunity to throw the enemy into chaos. In fact, if the rout had not occurred in the hand-to-hand combat, the impact would not be so great. Just like the Serbian army that collapsed before the contact did not suffer much loss, because it was difficult for the Austrian infantry to pursue. But at this time, a large-scale rout occurred in the hand-to-hand combat, and the Austrian infantry, who had already killed Red Eyes, would not stop. The soldiers holding bayonets bit the back of the Serbian army. And these fleeing Serbian troops completely became shields for the pursuers, so wherever these routs fled, the Serbian army was rotten. The collapse spread from right to left like dominoes. The soldiers of the Serbian army ran around like headless flies, and the speed of collapse exceeded everyone's imagination. Orva was still calculating the time to surrender. His remnants and some troops temporarily assembled by other warlords were struggling to resist a joint attack of the North-Slavi defenders and the Croatian army. These people had no way to retreat, so they resisted very tenaciously. The North-Slavi defenders and the Croatian army also fought very hard to join forces with Archduke Karl's army as soon as possible. The battle between the two sides was very fierce. The firepower of the Serbian army was not as good as that of the other side, and their marksmanship was not good. But they dug trenches in advance and used the advantages of the terrain to repel several attacks by the Austrian army. The latest novels are first published on the 69th book bar. But Karimi didn't want to lose face in front of Archduke Karl, so he ordered the cannons to be pushed to a place several hundred meters away from the enemy and fired directly. Jeladzic also organized a death squad and launched a desperate charge. Seeing the Austrian army break through his defense line, Orva sighed in his heart, "It's not that I don't want to help, but if I continue to fight with them, my whole army will be wiped out." Orva was about to surrender when he found that his signalman had returned. "Report, General. The main force of our army has surrendered to the Austrian army 20 minutes ago, and Marshal Valjevich's whereabouts are unknown. Damn it, damn it. We've been fooled again. Surrender quickly. Surrender quickly." In a small boat on the Danube, Edmüller and Valjevich sat opposite each other, eating jerky and drinking wine. "Don't worry, Marshal. You have money and I have connections. We will definitely be valued in England. England is a free country and they will definitely protect us." Valjevich took a sip of wine and said, "I finally understand how Napoleon felt at that time. England will not be my St. Helena, it is Elba. I trained the new Serbian army myself, and one day I will come back to take back what belongs to me." Chapter 105 Serbia's Last Stubbornness. The Serbian army did not resist. Valjevich's adjutant and the remaining generals also tried their best. It was just that they looked immature and powerless when it came to the father and son, Archduke Karl and Albrecht. As a commander who once wrestled with Napoleon, Archduke Karl's strength was naturally unquestionable. And Albrecht, as the best commander of Austria after Archduke Karl, was no less capable. The result of the two appearing on the battlefield at the same time was that the Serbian generals were beaten madly. It even made these Serbian generals feel that there were spies in their ranks who passed the news to the Austrians as soon as possible. Because every time they acted, the Austrian army would react. Sometimes they even thought more than the Serbs and took the lead in blocking the Serbian army's route. Only 2 hours after the war began, the Serbian army lost all its artillery positions. Tens of thousands of Serbian soldiers were compressed in a small space, and the cavalry troops that were supposed to come to the rescue did not appear. In fact, the cavalry troops that were supposed to come to the rescue had been harassed by the Austrian hunters. After finally getting rid of the tail, they found a slow-moving Austrian infantry unit on the periphery. The commander of the cavalry unit wanted to disperse this unit first and create chaos for the Austrian army. And the slow-moving Austrian unit was Albrecht's Vienna City Defense Army. The marching speed of the City Defense Army was like an old man taking a walk, because this group of second-generation ancestors were not used to this hard march. "Cavalry attack," the scout shouted. These second-generation ancestors who went to the battlefield for the first time were immediately panicked, and of course some of them were excited. They had all heard the story of the hollow square formation that broke the French cuirassiers at Waterloo, and they also wanted to be the protagonists of the story. Albrecht immediately stopped the fleeing soldiers. "Now running away is a dead end. Line up. We only have one way to choose, that is to hold our position and defeat the enemy." These second-generation ancestors hurriedly formed a hollow square formation, but unexpectedly looked good. This is no wonder, because this may be the only thing they can show off. They perform in the square every year on National Day, so they are familiar with the place. "Scattered soldiers, return to the team, pick up your weapons and attach bayonets." The soldiers of the City Defense Army took out their bayonets and attached them to the bayonet latches under the muzzles. Rifles to the shoulders, the rifles with bayonets were raised in unison. Although they had practiced before, it was the first time when there was an enemy in front of them. Ready to shoot, load gunpowder, ready to aim. The soldiers of the City Defense Army raised their guns and aimed forward, praying silently in their hearts. The Serbian cavalry was speeding up, and as long as the speed was fast enough, Austria would not have time to fire a second shot. In fact, Albrecht did not intend to shoot at a distance of 150 meters. Because this theoretical 40% hit rate may not even be 25% in actual combat. There is also the possibility that multiple soldiers aim at the same target and shoot. It was not until the cavalry reached about 50 meters that Albrecht ordered to open fire. With a burst of gunfire, the Serbian cavalry was knocked down. But the remaining cavalry could destroy the city defense army as long as they rushed into the formation. Raise the bayonets. Hold the formation. The soldiers of the city defense raised their bayonets high, and the horses refused to move forward no matter what when they saw the shining bayonets. The momentum of the Serbian cavalry was stopped, and the pants of many city defense soldiers were already wet. Once the cavalry's charge was blocked, it was the turn of the infantry. The second round of shooting knocked down another group of Serbian cavalry, which made the Serbian generals, who already had few cavalry, feel heartbroken. But before he had time to feel sad, a large group of Austrian hussars and dragoons launched a charge at him. Because the Serbian cavalry lost their spirit in the previous attack, coupled with the unequal strength of the cavalry on both sides, the battle soon turned into a one-sided massacre, and the Serbian cavalry began to withdraw from the battlefield. The soldiers of the city defense army saw that the Serbian cavalry was being chased and hacked by their own cavalry, and they all felt relieved. At this time, some people noticed that they had wet their pants, and when they were embarrassed, they found that there were water marks under the comrades around them. Everyone looked at each other and laughed. Some soldiers took the opportunity to show their bravery, chasing the Serbian cavalry with guns and firing. But no one knew whether those bullets could hit people. The Serbian cavalry wanted to cross the river to escape, but found that the gunboats of the Austrian navy had been waiting here for a long time. There were also temporary piles of debris on the bridge, and their escape route was blocked. Either surrender or to make a last fight for honor. The cavalry general was a Panslavist, and he was willing to sacrifice for his beliefs. But others didn't think so. What they pursued was a warm bed with a wife and children at home. Cavalry, attack as a whole. The cavalry general hadn't finished speaking. A saber pierced his body, and he looked at his comrades behind him and fell off the horse weakly. No one blamed the attacker for his shamelessness. On the contrary, many people were grateful to him for doing what others wanted to do but did not dare to do. At this point, all the Serbian cavalry units surrendered. The main force of the Serbian army, which was blocked in a narrow terrain, was suffering from the baptism of artillery fire. At the same time, the Austrian army rushed in from all directions to compress their already limited living space. If this continues, they can only wait for death. Everyone in the Serbian army knows it. But after several battles, Serbia's morale has completely collapsed and become a frightened bird. Why don't you surrender? I've said that we can't win at all, Stojkovic complained hysterically. The Croatians on the opposite side don't want us to surrender, and the Germans don't understand what we say. We are finished, and I should have paid 100 rubles to buy our lives. It's all over now. When I die, remember to bring my pocket watch to Lisa. Old Joe, I know you will definitely survive to the end, please, an old soldier cried. Old Joe did not take the pocket watch. We have to send them by ourselves. We have more people than the Austrians. As long as we work together, nothing is impossible. We just need to climb over the slope. The Austrian army headquarters is 5 kilometers away. Old Joe, what are you going to do? We can't beat them at all. We can't beat them even with all our personnel. Now many of our organizations have been destroyed. How can we beat them? The soldiers around gathered together. Although they didn't have hope, they didn't want to die here. In order to surround our army, the Austrians have moved to our 2 wings, and they have to divide their troops to seize our artillery positions. Now the center of the Austrian army is the weakest. The generals have been stunned and can't notice this. Do you think the gunfire on the north side is the weakest? Old Joe continued. This time, the officers around also gathered together. Old Joe is right. Although there are Austrians on all sides, the battle on the north side doesn't seem to be fierce. Everyone came up with an idea. To advance 5 kilometers at all costs to turn defeat into victory. How to do it, Old Joe, a senior officer asked. Follow me, but the other troops don't know yet. As long as we break through the enemy's formation, they will follow. The officer thought about it and it made sense. He immediately ordered his confidants to gather their troops and rush to the weakest link of the Austrian army on the north side. Kill, fight, the remnants of the Serbian army roared desperately, and charged with bayonets in the rain of bullets from the Austrian army. The collision of swords, guns and flesh and blood caused a large number of casualties in the first time. Old Joe rushed to the front of the team and stabbed an Austrian soldier to death with one shot. Immediately, Another Austrian soldier rushed towards him with a bayonet, but he dodged it nimbly. Then he kicked the Austrian soldier down with one foot, and then swung the butt of the rifle and smashed it hard on the other's head. The Austrian officer waved his command knife, as if he was commanding the army to retreat. Old Joe took the opportunity to stab the officer with a bayonet. The Austrian officer was obviously well trained in close combat and nimbly dodged the bayonet. The Austrian officer chopped down with a knife, and Old Joe blocked the saber with his rifle. Both sides kicked at each other at the same time, and after exchanging kicks, they both sat down on the ground. At this time, an Austrian soldier stabbed directly at Old Joe, who was lying on the ground. Old Joe rolled swiftly to avoid the fatal stab. But he didn't have time to pick up the rifle in his hand. He stood up and grabbed the rifle of the Austrian soldier, and the two wrestled together. Old Joe suddenly had an ominous premonition, and directly exchanged the position of the Austrian soldier with himself. With a gunshot, the Austrian officer's single gun fired, but the bullet was just blocked by Old Joe with the body of the Austrian soldier. The Austrian officer didn't have time to think about it, picked up a rifle and rushed up. Old Joe pushed the body of the Austrian soldier and continued to move forward, and the two sides roared and collided with each other. The Austrian officer's bayonet stabbed into the body, and Old Joe took the opportunity to pull out the dagger and turned around to cut the neck of the Austrian officer. The Austrian officer slowly fell down, holding his neck, and Old Joe did not stop to continue fighting. The first formation on the north side of the Austrian army had been torn apart. The latest novel is first published on 69shushu.com. But the remaining Austrian troops did not seem to have any intention of continuing to resist, but instead made way for the Serbian army. Seeing hope, the Serbian army rushed out to surround like a flood. At this time, the sound of gunfire suddenly rang out again, and the Austrian troops on both sides launched an attack at the same time. Then the Austrian army closed the gates, and the Serbian army behind was blocked again. With fewer people, it was easier to deal with, and soon the besieged Serbian army stopped resisting. Old Joe and other Serbian soldiers who rushed out were advancing towards the headquarters of the Austrian army with all their strength. Albrecht's army on the left wing. Archduke Albrecht, the remnants of the Serbian army are heading towards Archduke Karl's main camp. What should we do? The cavalry officer asked on horseback. What else can we do? Follow them. That's what my father told us, but the situation on the battlefield has changed. If we continue to follow them, it will be bad if these desperate people rush into Archduke Karl's camp and injure the Archduke. Don't worry, my father won't die that easily. Since Archduke Albrecht said so, the cavalry commander had no reason not to follow orders. On the plain, the Austrian cavalry was behind the charging Serbian army. The cavalry wantonly hacked and killed the Serbian soldiers who fell behind. Occasionally, a small group of cavalry passed through the Serbian army, and a large number of Serbian soldiers died tragically under sabers and spears. But they couldn't stop to form a square formation, because if they stopped, they might be surrounded. Then their desperate charge would lose its meaning. Now they can only move forward at all costs, because the goal is ahead. As long as. At this time, the Austrian army in front suddenly began to retreat. Don't they have dignity and honor? Bah, these rubbish, how can they be so shameless? Don't scold them, they are not fast, keep chasing, Old Joe shouted. Hearing Old Joe's voice, the remaining Serbian soldiers also cheered up. Finally, after paying a huge price, Old Joe led the team to the vicinity of Archduke Karl's tent. After a hard fight, Old Joe, covered in blood, rushed into Archduke Karl's tent. His hands left two eye-catching red handprints on the white tent. However, Archduke Karl's tent had long been empty, without even a single document. The pursuing troops caught up, and the leading officer applauded. Yes, you are very brave. As long as you surrender, we will guarantee your safety. After all, we are all soldiers, not butchers. The officer threw away his blood-stained gloves. He didn't know how many panicked Serbian soldiers he had killed along the way. This battle was more tragic than any other battle he knew, but it was not fierce. Because for a pursuer, all he had to do was kick away the pebbles blocking the road. In fact, the Serbian army had wanted to surrender a long time ago, but there were a large number of Croatian soldiers mixed in the Austrian army. They did not want to see the Serbian army surrender, and it would be better to destroy them all. After all, only dead enemies are good enemies. Soldiers of other nationalities could hardly understand Serbian, and the crazy behavior of the Serbian army made these Catholics confuse the Serbian army with the Ottoman army that besieged Vienna. Prince Eugen's march evoked the collective memory of the Austrian imperial army, and a war between countries became a war of national religion. A Croatian officer reluctantly translated the commander's words. The soldiers of the Serbian army were exhausted. When they heard that they were allowed to surrender, they collapsed to the ground like deflated balls. The soldier who was going to ask old Joe to take the letter burst into tears when he looked at the photo of his wife and his pocket watch. Stojkovic dropped his weapon and lay on the ground. Looking at the sunlight pouring down from the sky, he sighed that it was great to be alive. "Where is Archduke Karl?" Only old Joe roared with his gun, and he tried his best not to find a way out for his comrades. It turned out to be a road of death that led them to hell. He couldn't accept it. The commander raised an arc at the corner of his mouth, walked forward and straightened his uniform twice. "Of course our Archduke is with his army. Is he going to flee like your marshal?" After hearing this, old Joe collapsed on the ground powerlessly. It turned out that his goal had always been on the front line, under his own nose. The reserve force that broke the right-wing heavy troops was led by Archduke Karl himself. The Austrian commander turned and left. "Give them treatment, the war is over." Thanks to book friend 20200526094618467 for the monthly ticket. Chapter 106 Winner. In fact, Austria was very kind to these Serbs. The Serbian army at this time was not a trapped beast, but a group of exhausted beasts that had fought for 3 hours and ran for several kilometers. As long as the Austrian army continued to pursue, none of these Serbian soldiers would survive. The 10,000 people who broke out of the encirclement now had less than 2,000 people left under the continuous pursuit and hard fighting of the Austrian cavalry. Although the Austrian army that was chasing them had only more than 3,000 people, the 3,000 mixed teams of hussars and dragoons were not comparable to the 2,000 remnants of Serbia. The situation of the besieged Serbian army was not much better, with more than 20,000 people squeezed into a small space. They were bombarded for 3 hours until Archduke Karl felt that they had no power to resist and sent envoys to ask them to surrender. In fact, after completing the encirclement, Archduke Karl sent envoys according to his usual experience. Because creating meaningless killings is of no value to this kind of strategist. The envoy, who was just holding a white flag, was shot and killed halfway through. This violation of the rules of war was unacceptable to the Austrian army, and the envoys sent by the Serbian army to surrender after the Austrian army began the baptism of artillery fire also suffered the same fate. The envoys sent by both sides to negotiate suffered the same fate one after another, and the result was that both sides believed that it was a situation of life and death. Moreover, as Croatians were an important source of soldiers for the Austrian army, they had always had a bad relationship with the Serbs. The atrocities of the Serbian army at the beginning of this war made the Austrian army confuse the Serbs and Ottomans. In this era, education was not yet popular, and even many people in the aristocracy were illiterate. Religion and folk tales have an incomparable influence, and everyone in Austria has heard the story of the Ottoman Sultan's plan to destroy God's world and the siege of Vienna. This gave legitimacy and sanctity to this unintentional war, and soldiers from all countries hoped that they would be on the righteous side. The Serbian army was just the opposite. The clan leader, many areas of Serbia were still clan-based at that time, and the general said that the war was to liberate their compatriots enslaved by the Austrians. But why did they rob their compatriots' women and burn their compatriots' houses? It was even more incomprehensible why they killed the Austrians who were putting out a fire. The battle ended with a great victory for the Austrian army, and more than 200 flags of various types were captured. Europeans like to discuss this kind of thing as if it is quite glorious, and 86 cannons. The elimination of 35,000 Serbian soldiers turned Belgrade into ruins overnight. The loss of only 26 cannons, 8,000 soldiers, and 1 warship seemed to be a brilliant victory. In fact, nearly 200 villages were destroyed and nearly 100,000 people were displaced. The destroyed roads, bridges, houses and fields are incalculable. And the use of warships in the Danube made the entire Danube coastal countries feel uneasy and strengthened the riverside defense. In fact, this is completely unnecessary. The Danube River in the German state is too narrow to accommodate large warships. As for the Ottomans and Serbia in the lower reaches, as well as Wallachia and Moldavia, the fortifications they built on the banks of the Danube are likely to become an excuse for Austria to go to war. But the unscrupulous media in Austria don't care about this. They just want to make money. And boasting about Austria's powerful military force and the brutality of the Serbs will undoubtedly attract a large number of readers. Even the Austrian church jumped out and sang praises for Austria's victory. As for the nobles, they celebrated even more. After all, Vienna's city defense forces also participated in it and achieved certain results. Needless to say, how complicated the composition of Vienna's city defense forces is. Their victory is a good thing for all the families in Vienna. The capitalists also took advantage of this opportunity to make money, especially in the shipping and food industries. Soon, military enterprises and industries such as the construction industry will also receive orders from the Austrian imperial government. The Austrian Empire will solve the problems exposed in this war, such as the hit rate of firearms, the firing rate of artillery, the structure and thickness of the city walls, etc. But as a poor government, where will the money come from? Of course, it will rely on Austrian financial capitalists, and Rothschild Bank will naturally bear the brunt. You think Rothschild Bank will take out real money to help the Austrian Empire? You are wrong. What Rothschild Bank wants is the right to issue bonds. Rothschild Bank will issue 200 million guilders of Austrian government bonds, and they only subscribed to 20 million guilders. Where will the remaining 180 million guilders come from? Of course, it will come from the people. Otherwise, how could Austria's victory be so exaggerated, and public opinion would be one-sidedly boasting about Austria's glorious victory? The victory of the siege of Nordsavie was even raised to the height of the siege of Vienna, and a group of experts came forward to assert that the Austrian Empire would restore its former glory. Even British Foreign Secretary Palmerston was shocked. He found Leon Rothschild, the head of the Rothschild family in the UK, to inquire about the situation. He was considering whether to continue the policy of suppressing Russia and winning over Austria. Leon Rothschild was frank with the anxious foreign minister, "These are just smokescreens released by my uncle. The Austrian Empire looks strong like a toothless old dog. In fact, it is already in its twilight years and has no power to compete with a powerful Russia for the Balkans. If Russia and Austria go to war, the Austrian Empire will be quickly defeated." But the head of the Rothschild family in Britain did not say that if Austria was quickly defeated, Austrian bonds would quickly depreciate. In order to maintain world hegemony, Britain would certainly not sit idly by and watch Russia grow stronger. When Britain came out to support the Austrian Empire, Russia would fail in isolation. Even Napoleon could not fight against all of Europe, and the bonds of the Austrian Empire would pick up. At this time, the Rothschild Bank, which bought at a low price, made a fortune. You think they still paid a price of 20 million guilders, but you are wrong again. There is something called a discount rate, and the discount rate required by the Rothschild Bank is 10%. The latest novel will be first published on the 69th book bar. That is to say, the Austrian Empire issued 200 million guilders of national debt. But only 180 million guilders were actually received. These 20 million guilders are equivalent to the remuneration paid by the Austrian Empire to the Rothschild Bank. The Rothschild Bank is just using the Austrians' money to buy Austrians' national debt. If there is another war in the future, they can make money twice, so why not do it? Thanks to the book friend 20210806232711729 for the reward. I have finally written the 10th chapter in the original outline. Thanks to the friends who have been reading the book for so long. I hope you and I can see the growth and completion of this book. Chapter 107 Reunion. Franz in the Winter Palace pretended that he didn't understand Russian and wanted to get away with it. But the little girls in the room were obviously very interested in this foreign kid and surrounded him. But Franz was wrong. Many Russian nobles intermarried with German nobles. So there are many people who can speak German, but why does this German sound so strange to Franz? Is it a smell of wool? No, it feels weird. In fact, it is because these Russian girls learn North German, while Austrians speak South German. Although they are all German, they are actually very different and difficult to communicate. The little princess finally found the big villain who forced her to get up. Seeing that this big villain was surrounded by her sisters in the center, she was even more angry. It should be herself standing in the center, C position, and she should be the focus of everyone's attention. She took off her dancing shoes and walked forward with a smile, ready to teach the big villain in front of her a lesson. What did my aunt say he was? Anyway, it doesn't matter. I am a princess after all. No one in Russia dares to control me except Uncle Nicholas. Franz also noticed this little girl with a smile and murderous aura. When he was wondering, the little girl actually swung her dancing shoes. Is this an assassin? This thought flashed through Franz's mind, but he was relieved immediately. This is impossible. He must have read too many novels, but the shoes are flying towards his face. Franz's body moved before his brain, and he grabbed the dancing shoes in the little girl's hand directly in the air. The little girl swung in the air and didn't know what happened. She looked at Franz in confusion. Where are my dancing shoes? Here. Franz shook the dancing shoes in his hand. Give them back to me. The little girl wanted to rush over to grab the dancing shoes. According to Franz's experience, he could stop her by pressing her forehead. Sure enough, after the forehead was pressed, the little girl with her teeth and claws could not move forward at all. At this time, two princesses of Nicholas I, Grand Duchess Olga and Grand Duchess Alexandra, ran out. Excuse me, she is our sister Anna Katerina. She is very lively, isn't she? The two princesses ran out to smooth things over. Anna wanted to go crazy. After all, no one dared to annoy her. But the two princesses obviously didn't want the situation to get worse, and quickly covered Anna's mouth and smiled politely but awkwardly. Franz also smiled back. After all, Franz also wanted to find an excuse to leave. The little princess was pulled aside by her two sisters. Anna, what are you going to do? You can't hide him even if you don't like him. If you really hid him, it will be a diplomatic incident. When the time comes, we will answer our father's questions truthfully. Hearing the name of Nicholas I, Princess Anna shrank her neck. She was still very afraid of this uncle. Her courage to make trouble lies in her father, but her father is also afraid of her uncle, and she is also afraid of this fierce uncle. Franz called Colonel Bordeaux in, and fortunately Franz had brought a batch of lollipops. Originally, he wanted to take the opportunity of coming to St. Petersburg to promote it in Russia, but now it's a good deal for these little lollies. In fact, Franz made a profit, because is there any better promoter than these little princesses? Never underestimate the attraction of candy to children. Sure enough, after having lollipops, the little girls automatically skipped Franz. Franz successfully escaped, and just as he went out, he met Nicholas I. Your Majesty, the Tsar. I extend my sincere greetings to you. You're welcome, cunning little devil. Are you satisfied with a gift I prepared for you? Why did the Tsar's voice sound familiar? Franz was puzzled. What do you mean, cunning little devil? Don't pretend. I heard that you brought a woman into the palace when you were 6 years old. You are worthy of being a descendant of the Habsburg family. I am optimistic about you. Franz's head was full of black lines, and he was suddenly stunned as if he was struck by lightning. You were there at the time? You knew all this a long time ago? Of course, it doesn't matter if the great Tsar is omnipresent. I just wanted to see how those bugs would start a war. I didn't expect that someone would use my name to deceive those idiots in Serbia. I really want to meet this genius. Do you know who he is? In fact, the one who caused the trouble was himself. And the bugs that the Tsar referred to were naturally those capitalists who benefited. I don't know, Your Majesty. Did you have a good time in Vienna before? Yes, very good. Especially you gave me a big gift. But don't mention that matter again, just treat it as a little secret between the two emperors. Franz felt a little uneasy. Did the Tsar already know that he was the planner of the Serbian war? Your Majesty, you mean, your judgment on the war situation in Afghanistan is extremely accurate. The British Expeditionary Force of 20,000 took Kabul without bloodshed, but they were unable to protect themselves in less than a year. Now Britain has to transfer another 5,000 people from India to consolidate the current rule. They can't stabilize it, Your Majesty the Tsar. Oh? Do you know who is betting with us and how much influence he has in Britain? The latest novels are first published on Liuji Ujishuba. That's not important. What's important is that Britain is a maritime power. Afghanistan is landlocked and British forces cannot enter. They have problems with even the most basic logistical supplies, let alone rule. Afghanistan, the graveyard of empires, is not a cover. Britain is not the first nor the last great empire to die in Afghanistan. I really like you more and more, kid. Are Russian girls pretty? Do you like any? I think both your mother and the Habsburg family would like you to marry a Russian girl. Your Majesty, I am only 11 years old. It is too early to talk about marriage. Franz's expression was a little stiff. Forget it, kid. The blood of the British makes me excited. Should I help those poor people? Excuse me, your Russia is still thousands of kilometers away from Afghanistan. And what your expeditionary force of the Khiva Khanate encountered. You should know. I hope you don't learn from the British. Well, I heard that you are also a member of the negotiation team. Yes." Seeing Franz's expression, the Tsar decided not to make trouble for himself. "Your follower is here." The Tsar waved his hand. A beautiful Russian court lady lowered her head humbly, waiting for the Tsar's order. "Vodia, from today on, you will be responsible for the daily life of the Austrian crown prince. No matter what he needs, try your best to meet him." "Yes, Your Majesty," Vodia replied respectfully. "Archduke Franz, please follow me." Wojciech's manners were very decent, and his voice was pleasant, giving people a very comfortable feeling. The Tsar actually ran away secretly to participate in an auction held by a businessman. And he participated in the same gambling game as himself, and the bet was the same as himself. This made Franz feel a little emotional. "I just don't know whether I should feel the power of the Rothschild family, the courage of the Tsar, or my own arrogance. I've been busy recently, so I'll just make do with it." Chapter 108 Post-War Reconstruction and Punishment, Part 1. Nordsavie, a prisoner of war camp. Nearly 30,000 Serbian soldiers were confined in a makeshift prisoner of war camp. However, the scale of the prisoner of war camp seemed a bit too large. In fact, under Franz's multi-party coordination, a new city was prepared to be built here. Vojvodina's resources are not bad, but because it is far away from the core area of the Austrian Empire, Hungary is naturally unwilling to see Vojvodina, as a royal territory, grow and develop. As a border area, the most prosperous area in Vojvodina province is actually near the Nordsavie fortress. After all, there are garrisons here all year round, and soldiers of this era have almost no concept of saving money. So the soldiers led the development of the local area, and merchants often came and went to form the most primitive settlement here. At the same time, this is also the largest market in the entire Vojvodina province, and there is a grand market every month. At the market, products from all over Vojvodina will gather here, as well as Austrian merchants coming along the Danube, and even smugglers from Ottoman and Serbia. A very strange rule: there are tariffs from Austria to Hungary, and tariffs are also required from Vojvodina to Hungary. However, there is no tariff from Austria to Vojvodina. This resulted in the fact that although Vojvodina province and Austria are separated by Hungary, it did not fall to the side of Hungary. But this Serbian invasion almost strangled the buds of the city, and the villages around Nordsavie were also destroyed. Coupled with the previous floods, the grain production in Vojvodina province will be reduced by 40% this year. After the disaster in the war, it is necessary to prevent the epidemic and provide disaster relief. Serbia next door is facing the same situation. And work for relief is the best method Franz can think of at present. Otherwise, there are so many displaced refugees, plus natural disasters and man-made disasters. Franz really doesn't want to suppress another hunger riot. It's easy to say to build dams, dredge rivers, and build another city. But the treasury of the Austrian Empire really can't come up with so much money. Franz personally invested 1.5 million guilders, gambling proceeds plus principal, and at the same time, Franz persuaded Sarah's father, Jacob Ardieff, to invest in the construction of the new city. Jacob Ardieff was a Jewish banker who converted to Catholicism. He was definitely a freak among the Jews. Almost all Jewish bankers who converted to Catholicism did so in order to make more money and privileges, but this one wanted to leave a name in history. At a time when other Jewish businessmen were jumping back and forth between major countries, he wished he could put a label on his forehead that he was Austrian. In theory, a Jewish daughter, even if she converted to Catholicism, would never become a royal maid. The first requirement for the maid of the crown prince was that she must be of noble origin, and the second was that she must be a pious virgin. Although Maya was with Franz, her identity was a maid who did rough work, and it could never change. It was just that with Franz's support, her life was more comfortable than that of ordinary royal maids. Sarah's father was only an honorary nobleman, and as for Catholics, he was also a halfway monk. When Jacob Ardieff found Madame Sophie and proposed that his daughter be a maid beside Franz, Colonel Schussel almost couldn't help laughing. As expected, Madame Sophie issued an expulsion order. 2 tall royal guards lifted Jacob up and prepared to throw him to the back door of the palace as usual. "Madame Sophie, I have prepared a gift for His Highness Franz. It's in my arms, no need, get out," Madame Sophie replied unhappily. The surrounding royal guards heard that Madame Sophie was angry, and hurriedly quickened their pace to avoid being unlucky. 1 million guilders. I came in a hurry, but the birthday gift of 1,000,000 guilders prepared for His Highness Franz is in my coat pocket, Jacob shouted. 1,000,000 guilders is enough to become relatives with any Grand Duke in the German state, and even to marry a princess of a small country. Because the financial situation of European royal families is generally not good, one is corruption, the other is poor management, and the most important is the impact of capitalism. After getting tacit consent, a royal guard took out 10 checks from Jacob's jacket pocket. 1,000,000 guilders also shocked Colonel Schussel and Madame Sophie. Colonel Schussel was surprised that someone was so stupid. With so much money, why not give his daughter to someone as a servant? Madame Sophie was surprised that someone would be so willing to get close to her son. What is this for? As a mother, the first thing she thought of was to protect her family, but 1,000,000 guilders was too much? Madame Sophie's annual pension was only 5,000 guilders, and her husband's annual pension was 8,000 guilders. The annual pensions of the two people added up to just 1.3% of this gift. This made her start to consider whether to accept this proposal. Please go back. Thank you for your kindness. But the royal rules cannot be changed. Even if I am Franz's mother, I can't do anything. This time Madame Sophie's attitude was obviously much better. After all, it was a good thing to have a banker who was so optimistic about her son. Madame Sophie, can I say one more thing? Jacob Artilius said through gritted teeth. Madame Sophie nodded, and two royal guards put Jacob down. Jacob walked up to Madame Sophie, took out 2 checks with gold rims and wrote astonishing amounts on them. Jacob let out a long sigh. I want to say that I am an Austrian citizen, I just want to serve the royal family wholeheartedly. Madame Sophie looked at the numbers on the 2 checks, and then looked at the previous check. Your daughter can speak German, right? The latest novels are first published on the 69th book bar. Of course, German is her mother tongue, and she can speak many other languages. Bring her to see me tomorrow. I will arrange for someone to teach her court etiquette. Although Sarah didn't say it, Franz, who is well informed, already knew Sarah's details clearly. Sarah's father financed Franz's reconstruction plan with 10,000,000 guilders, but the collateral was the entire assets of the Artis Bank. General Jeladzic also took out 200,000 guilders of personal assets to support Franz. Under his call, make Vojvodina the second home of Croatians, Croatia also raised 200,000 guilders from all sides, but it was Jeladzic's soldiers who raised 1,000,000 guilders. But it soon proved to be an extremely successful investment. After the war, the Austrian Empire began a large-scale inventory, and a large amount of unowned land and industry were nationalized. And it dealt a devastating blow to the anti-Austrian forces in Vojvodina. All the wealth collected was used to repay debts. And who the best wealth belonged to was naturally decided by Franz. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 109, Battle Reconstruction and Punishment, Part 2. The soldiers of the Serbian army were required to do forced labor. After all, post-war reconstruction requires a large number of manpower, and it is impossible to assign them to build prisoner-of-war camps. The second batch of medical supplies and medical staff shipped from Vienna has arrived, but it is still a drop in the bucket for the entire Vojvodina province. Because the wounded are not only Austrian soldiers, but also civilians, and those Serbian soldiers who have surrendered. At first, Archduke Karl planned to hand over the Serbian wounded to the Serbs themselves. But at Franz's strong request, he agreed to treat them equally and let Austrian doctors treat them. Since the scope of treatment cannot be reduced, the number of aid has to be increased. This also includes Dr. Semmelweis, who is a very compassionate doctor and also good at observation. He found that the mortality rate of patients of doctors who washed their hands with a holy water with bleach, sold by the church before surgery would be very low. And those doctors who did not wash their hands would have a high mortality rate of patients they handled. Dr. Semmelweis once suggested to the Vienna General Hospital that all doctors should wash their hands before surgery. His original purpose was just to promote the benefits of hand washing and help patients get through the difficult times better. But what he did was equivalent to slapping all doctors in the face, because his theory was contrary to the recognized medical theory at the time. It was also somewhat religious, and other doctors thought he was a fanatic who was brainwashed by religion. Many people refused to work with him, so he lost his job. Fortunately, After the war, the Austrian government temporarily recruited a large number of doctors from the society. He, who held a medical license and wandered around Vienna, responded to the call of the Austrian government at the first time. At the same time as the Austrian imperial government issued a call, the Austrian Catholic Church also sent a large number of priests with medical skills and supplies purchased by the church to Nordsavie. This was of course the credit of Archbishop Rauscher, and the boss behind the scenes was naturally Franz. In fact, it was very simple to persuade Archbishop Rauscher, because although this person was very conservative, he believed in destiny. Franz told the archbishop that this was not just charity but a struggle with pagans for believers. The archbishop was naturally like a chicken blood, and gave death orders to other Austrian bishops to send people to support Vojvodina. Why did Archbishop Rauscher have such great power? It was simple because the Pope of Rome was nothing in the eyes of the Austrian bishops. The one who really had the power to decide their life and death was the Archbishop of Vienna appointed by the Emperor. The Pope of Rome was only a nominal leader, and the churches of various countries stopped obeying the Pope's orders as early as the 15th century. Sometimes the Pope's appointment was even considered to be interference in the country's internal affairs. It was not until the 20th century that the Pope restored his right to appoint bishops, but it was only formal. But Archbishop Rauscher was different. He was appointed directly by the Emperor. All bishops in Austria were subject to his supervision and management. And he was also one of the cardinals appointed by the Pope of Rome, and had the right to elect the Pope. Any bishop who opposed Archbishop Rauscher was equivalent to offending the royal family and the Roman Curia at the same time, and was more likely to be directly dismissed by Rauscher using the power in his hands. Therefore, the bishops of the Austrian Church, whether they were truly compassionate or afraid of retaliation, devoted themselves to the rescue. Dr. Semmelweis boarded a crowded cargo ship to Vojvodina, and he did not forget to promote the hand-washing theory on the ship. Of course, he was met with countless white eyes and boos, which he was used to. Some people even threw potatoes and rotten eggs at Dr. Semmelweis, just when Semmelweis was about to pick up a few potatoes for dinner. A man picked up a stick and hit him hard on the back, and soon a group of people surrounded him and beat him. Most doctors of this era were controlled by nobles and Jews. They believed that the hands of nobles were clean and flawless, and washing hands was an insult to them. Many doctors did not even wash their hands after dissecting the body and going to the toilet, and started the operation directly. Colleagues are enemies, heretics must die, and a group of doctors in anger began to beat Semmelweis directly. In history, Dr. Semmelweis was said to have been beaten and abused to death. The founder of modern surgery died in humiliation and abuse, but this time a group of priests on the same ship saved him. The priests obviously thought that Dr. Semmelweis was very good, compassionate and a devout believer. The priests called the accompanying officers to stop the tragedy from happening. These priests were church doctors sent by the Catholic Church, but they learned more about Chinese medicine. They were good at controlling infections and epidemics, but if they were really asked to perform surgical operations, they could only watch. This time, it was a blessing in disguise. Dr. Semmelweis found a new job, the dean of the Vienna Church General Hospital. Semmelweis' medical team had the highest survival rate in treating casualties in Vojvodina. Of course, it was not only Semmelweis's advanced ideas and superb medical skills, but also the combination of Chinese and Western medicine that greatly improved the success rate of treatment. Washing hands before surgery and purifying water sources with bleaching powder has since been called the Semmelweis rule. Under pressure from the Church, the Austrian Imperial Ministry of Health had to admit its correctness. This war greatly promoted the development of Austrian medicine, especially battlefield medicine, which trained a large number of qualified doctors for the army. As for the problem of no anesthetics, Franz certainly knew ether. It's just that he didn't know the chemical formula of ether. Fortunately, Franz knew another name for ether, laughing gas. The latest novel is first published on the 69th book bar. With the funding of Franz, several doctors and chemists in Vienna finally developed real ether a year later. This drug has saved countless lives in the years that followed. Nordsavie New Town. Countless Serbian soldiers and local people participated in the post-war reconstruction. The Austrian soldiers were responsible for vigilance and also joined in. After all, the salary of the soldiers was too low, and there was no rule that soldiers could not participate in post-war reconstruction. This time it was a defensive war, and there were 3 archdukes in charge. No one dared to risk the world's disapproval and think about taking the corpse. Of course, all those who did so were hanged on nearby trees without exception. You can't steal corpses or rob, but you can't block all the ways for soldiers to earn money. After all, blocking someone's financial path is like killing their parents, so participating in post-war reconstruction became the only way for soldiers to earn money. At the same time, the Serbian soldiers also heard from the Austrian soldiers who participated in the reconstruction that the military leaders had long known about the surrender of the 17-member parliament. Chapter 110, Battle Reconstruction and Punishment, Part 2. The Serbian soldiers who heard the news were furious. There was no doubt that these generals hiding behind had sent them to hell. And all this could have been avoided. If they surrendered, they would at most be expelled from the country. But now, after a bloody battle between the two sides, their lives and deaths depended on the Austrian army. What made the Serbian soldiers even more angry was the reason for launching this war. A few swindlers used a few newspapers to deceive the 17-member parliament. In the end, they had to pay the price of blood, and those swindlers were still at large. The members of the 17-member parliament were thoroughly liquidated. Except for 2 who were taken to Vienna for trial, they were still imprisoned in the prison of the Austrian Empire. The others had been secretly executed by Milos. Of course, the safest way to eliminate competitors was to completely eliminate them physically. The soldiers pointed their spearheads at those generals who were still domineering even in the prisoner of war camps. Old Joe had just been treated by an Austrian doctor when he heard the news. The hard fight he and his comrades had made now seemed not only futile but also ridiculous. Countless ordinary soldiers gathered around Old Joe, and they all hoped to ask the generals for an explanation. Old Joe naturally had no choice but to do his duty, and he also wanted to know why the generals did this. However, the general's attitude was very cold. "Go back, Sergeant. This is not the place for you to come, and you are not qualified to ask these questions. We have lost tens of thousands of people, and now there are 30,000 people detained here. You said these things have nothing to do with us." Old Joe was very excited. "Do you know about the surrender of the 17-member parliament? What if you know? What if you don't know? Everything is over. Sergeant, go back to your team. Because of your stupidity and arrogance, a generation of Serbia has suffered a catastrophe. You are still enjoying your life here. Why don't you go to work? You only lost your life, but we lost the future of Serbia. You guys think you are great after carrying guns for a few days in the war? Without us, you are nothing. The war is over. Why are you still planning? The soldiers are working hard, and you are hiding here drinking coffee." Old Joe grabbed the coffee on the table and threw it on the ground. "Asshole!" The general kicked Old Joe in the stomach, and he fell to the ground because his injury was not healed. The kick just now caused the wound to move, and Old Joe spat out a mouthful of blood. He stood up holding the corner of the table and said, "You go out to work and apologize to the soldiers you killed. Sergeant, you are not qualified to give orders here. Get out. I won't go out unless you go outside with me to work with the soldiers. You should atone for your crimes, not escape here." The soldiers just want an apology. Before Old Joe finished speaking, a dagger appeared on his waist and blood could not stop flowing out. A general's personal soldier was holding the dagger and twisting it fiercely. "Kill you, the leader of the trouble, and I'll see who dares to mention this matter again." Old Joe pushed the personal soldier away, pulled out the dagger, and staggered towards the door. Seeing Old Joe holding a sharp weapon, the personal soldiers had all heard of his legend. Immediately, several personal soldiers surrounded him and inserted several daggers into his body. We are all Serbs?" the soldiers at the door shouted loudly without waiting for Old Joe to come out. The reply they got was that Old Joe had left. Later, Old Joe's body was found in the canal. He was stabbed 16 times and had no life. Stojkovic couldn't believe his eyes. The legend of immortality ended just like that. There was a huge disagreement in the Austrian government about the handling of Serbian uniforms. Count Kolarov mainly asked for ransom. If he couldn't pay, he would send these people to the mines. It may be exaggerated to say that in high-risk areas, a life of 9 deaths is a risk. But the average life expectancy of a miner is only 3 years, which is a fact. The military, represented by Count Ural, advocated completely weakening Serbia's military strength. At the same time, it was also to warn Austria's potential enemies to keep these 30,000 Serbian young and middle-aged people in the Austrian Empire forever. The royal family had a different view. They felt that the above two methods were too inhumane. It was contrary to the consistent tradition of the Habsburg family, and the royal family had never given up the dream of regaining Belgrade and continuing to move westward to Greater Austria. Although the Ottoman Empire has long lost its glory, it is still the number one enemy in the hearts of the Austrians. Many people even believe that beating the Ottoman Empire is the key to Austria's rise. France had long anticipated this. Serbia suffered serious disasters this year. If there is no external assistance, I don't know how many people will starve to death this winter. This is also one of the reasons why the 17-member parliament can be easily bewitched. The latest novel will be first published on the 6th book bar on September 9th. Because if they don't make changes, the rebels will help them change. They also want to shift domestic conflicts and maintain their rule. France took advantage of this, but France does not want to recover Serbia at present. Because for the current Austrian Empire, the Russian-Austrian alliance is the top priority. France doesn't care about Miloš's alliance and his so-called favors. France cares about not further intensifying national conflicts and maintaining the face of the two major countries of Russia and Austria. The ransom is not true at all. Serbia can't afford too much money. Asking for ransom is equivalent to asking Russia for money, which may sow the seeds of instability between Russia and Austria. As for returning the prisoners directly, it is impossible. Austria is one of the 5 major powers after all. In this way, where's the dignity and status of the great powers? It seems to have entered a dead end, but the solution is very simple: work for relief. Sign a labor contract with Serbia, and the ransom will be borne by the labor of the Serbian invaders themselves. At the same time, Austria allows Serbian labor to enter Austria, and Austria will pay in kind. Anyway, most Hungarians can't sell their grain, so transport Hungarian grain to Serbia. At most, they can collect less tariffs from them, and the Hungarian nobles must be very happy to clear their stocks. The Serbs can also get food to solve their urgent needs. At the same time, they can also clear the domestic instability factors while the armies of these warlords are away. Solving the food crisis will also help the rule of the Obrenović family, and Miloš naturally has no reason to disagree. At the same time, this conciliatory policy also eased the domestic ethnic conflicts to a certain extent. It prevented the conflict between Croats and Serbs from escalating further. It also left the Austrian Empire with an opportunity to recover Serbia. In France's plan, there was absolutely no abandonment of war reparations. However, the country that took the blame was neither Serbia nor Russia, but Chapter 111: Taking a day off. I have a cold and my head is dizzy. My thoughts are in a mess. I need to take a day off. Chapter 112: Negotiation, Part 1. At the negotiation table, Baron Palmerston was furious about Serbia's atrocities. This is simply a challenge to the international order. It is a trampling and insult to civilization. Damn barbarians, dare to commit such atrocities against a civilized country, they must be punished. Everyone was still wondering when this British diplomat who put interests above all else became so eager for justice. Palmerston slammed the table, startling the Ottoman Grand Vizier next to him. Ferzak can be regarded as the most unlucky Grand Vizier in Ottoman history. He signed countless humiliating treaties in his life. Before, he was even forced to sign an unequal treaty by his vassal Egypt. If the rise of Egypt was not on the interests of the European powers, I am afraid that the Ottoman Empire would have been swallowed up by Egypt long ago. The last thing he had to sign was his own death sentence confirmation. He kept repeating in his heart, "You can't see me, you can't see me." He hoped to escape, but Palmerston obviously didn't want to fulfill his wish. The Ottoman Empire must be held responsible for this. You should cede Serbia to the Austrian Empire and compensate the Austrian Empire for its losses. In fact, Serbia had been independent for a long time, and it is still a protectorate of Russia. No matter what, it should not cause trouble to the Ottoman Empire, but the Ottoman Empire is, after all, the nominal suzerain of Serbia. This is a difficult situation for the unfortunate Grand Vizier. Even if he admits defeat and cedes land, it will not work. Because once he agrees to cede Serbia, it will cause dissatisfaction among the Russians. I am afraid that they will find an excuse to fight a Russo-Turkish war again. By then, I don't know how much land my country will lose and how much money it will pay. But if I don't agree, the British will not let me go. According to the Straits Convention, the British warships are still anchored in the port of Istanbul. Although they are only some light warships, they are enough to deal with the Ottoman Empire's depleted navy. At this time, the sick man of West Asia, the Ottoman Empire, was recently defeated by its vassal Egypt. There was a call for reform in the country, and an Ottoman westernization movement was rising. Developing industry, restricting privileges, and training new troops, everything is in full swing. As the Grand Vizier of the Ottoman Empire, he naturally hopes that his motherland will prosper and become strong. Although he is the first traitor in the mouths of the reformists, he still hopes to provide a good environment for reform. British capital has penetrated all over the Ottoman Empire. But if it leaves the British capital, let alone reform, even maintaining rule will become a problem. Moreover, in the previous Turkish-Egyptian war, Britain personally led the fleet of the powers to support the Ottoman Empire and maintain the Ottoman rule. If you don't agree to the British request at this time, it may cause the anger of the British. But once Serbia falls into the hands of the Austrians can use Serbia as a springboard to attack from all sides. Serbia is the last barrier of the Ottoman Empire to defend against the Austrians. Once it is lost, there will be no danger to defend. At that time, I am afraid that the Austrians will be more excessive than the Russians, rushing directly into the heart of the Ottoman Empire and even armed to make a pilgrimage to Constantinople. After all, the Ottomans once besieged the capital of the Austrians, and the Austrians may also want to come to the siege of Constantinople. Viscount Palmerston had greeted him long ago and gave him a very generous gift. I hope he can agree to Austria's annexation of Serbia. If he does so, Britain will promise to support the Ottoman Empire in the next Russo-Turkish war. I have a cold recently and feel very uncomfortable. I have put together more than 1,000 words, so you can just read it. Chapter 113 Negotiation, Part 2. Palmerston's plan was to get the Ottomans to agree first, and then the Russian representatives would certainly oppose it. At that time, he could take the opportunity to sow discord between Austria and Russia. Once Austria and Russia turned against each other, his goal against Russia would be achieved. It must be said that it is very cost-effective to give something that no longer belongs to you to others in exchange for British protection. However, the credibility of the British is a problem, and Fouquet could not decide for a while after weighing the pros and cons at this time. The French representative Francois Guizot spoke up. I think what the Viscount said is right. Austria's permanent occupation of Serbia is in the interests of all of us. What do you think? Lord Vissel is the foreign minister of Prussia, unlike his descendants who are known for their iron and blood. He is a typical capitulationist, and his purpose is to divert the disaster to the east. Once Austria obtains Serbia, it will inevitably prepare to invade the Ottoman Empire. Even if Austria does not want to march east, it will have to spend energy to defend Serbia. In this way, the Kingdom of Prussia can continue to keep a low profile until the day when it has the strength to compete with Austria for the leadership of Germany. I completely agree with you. You know that Austria is the chairman of the German Confederation. We fully support Austria's annexation of Serbia, but Russia's interests cannot be ignored, Vissel replied. Vissel's words seemed to be fair and sympathetic to Russia. But in fact, his intentions were very sinister, and his purpose was also to provoke relations between Russia and Austria. Unlike the British, the Prussians hoped to get Russia's support from geopolitical considerations. But surprisingly, the Russian representatives did not express their views, but just watched coldly. Because the Tsar had told Foreign Minister Nishirlov to try his best to exercise restraint. Seeing that the foreign minister did not express his views, the members of the Russian delegation naturally did not dare to act rashly, but just glared at the guys who were taking advantage of the situation. The two Russian marshals stared at Fouquet, as if they would kill him on the spot if he dared to agree. It doesn't matter. For Palmerston, as long as Serbia is given to Austria, it will be useless even if Russia is restrained. In the face of absolute interests, human character and morality seem worthless. As the first generation of king of understanding, he has absolute self-confidence. Palmerston once said, there are only 3 people in the world who understand Europe. One is Prince Albert, who is dead, one is a German professor, who is crazy, and the other is me. But I forgot, Palmerston was a loyal believer in the Russian threat theory and practiced it all his life. But his real purpose was to block Russia in the Black Sea and dominate the Ottoman legacy in the Near East. It's just that the greedier people are, the more they know how to make choices. As long as Austria obtains Serbia, Russia and Austria will become competitors. Because no one will give up the fat meat that is within reach, and the weak Austria cannot be the opponent of the Russians. The only way for Austria to defeat Russia is to seek help from the British. At this time, the British can only sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight and wait for the right opportunity to subdue the polar bear. Britain's world hegemony can continue, and the Austrian Empire no longer has the conditions to invade the Ottoman Empire after the war with the Russians. It can only recuperate and guard against Russian retaliation while continuing to be a younger brother to the British in exchange for their support. Now that three great powers have supported Austria's annexation of Serbia, Franz thought that the Austrians would not oppose it themselves. It seems that he can only agree, otherwise he will offend the four great powers at the same time. As for delaying, it is no longer necessary. The Sultan also knows that he has no right to bargain with the great powers. Egypt, which beat the Ottoman Empire to cede territory and seek peace, does not even have the qualifications to let them use their full strength in front of the great powers. The Sultan has already handed over the full power of this negotiation to Franz, just hoping to pay less compensation and give up less power. If he can get out of this unscathed by only giving up Serbia, Franz is very happy. Just as Franz walked to the negotiation table and was about to sign, a big hand slapped the peace treaty. "Do you think this is the end?" The speaker was not the Russian representative, but the member of the Austrian delegation. The commander of the Salzburg garrison, the hot-tempered General Hina, has many nicknames: the executioner of Arad, the hyena of Brescia, the tiger of Habsburg, and the cruelest butcher in Austrian history. As a pampered noble, Franz had never seen such terrible eyes. As the illegitimate son of a candidate and a Jewish woman, Julius Hina had been looked down upon since childhood. He was wounded 3 times in the Napoleonic Wars and returned to the battlefield 3 times. Finally, he was appreciated by a marshal and his daughter was married to him. Although he was no longer the young man who came to Austria alone and wanted to establish merit on the battlefield. But a person's temperament is difficult to change, and he has a heavy murderous aura. Compared with the angry eyes of those Russian generals, it is obviously more terrifying to see General Hina's eyes that seem to be like a beast that wants to choose a person to devour. Franz unconsciously took 2 steps back and just retreated to the vicinity of the Russian delegation. Russian Foreign Minister Nisharlov opened his mouth for the first time and said, "Turks, you are on the wrong side." It was just a light sentence, but it had an unusual meaning. One is that Franz mistakenly walked into the Russian team, and the other meaning is that you should not think that you can pretend that Russia does not exist by mixing with the British. Although Russia can't do anything to the British on the sea, it still has many ways to deal with you, the Ottoman weakling on land. Respected General Hina, what else do you dissatisfaction? Please say it, since it is a peace conference, everything can be discussed. Seeing Franz shrinking back, Palmerston spoke first. He knew that the Austrians were not satisfied with this result, so he released Hina, the mad dog, to disrupt the situation. As expected of a person who is known as the Prime Minister of Europe, Prince Metternich is indeed shrewd and calculating. However, Palmerston is not worried that the Austrians will open their mouths too high, but he is afraid that the Austrians will not bite this bait. The latest novel is first published on the 69th book bar. Now Austria is a hot commodity that everyone is trying to win over, but after the negotiations are over, Austria will be a grandson. At that time, Austria must choose a side. Whether it stands on the side of Russia or the side of Britain, it will be a younger brother. On the premise that Austria swallowed up Serbia, it was impossible to maintain the status quo. Serbia, a small country, dared to openly invade our Austrian Empire. I don't believe there is no one behind them. Hina's momentum was somewhat aggressive. Palmerston thought of Russia, but Nisselov thought of the British. The reason is very simple, because they both believed that only each other had the strength and motivation to do this. Palmerston and Nisselov looked at each other, and the air almost froze. Hina suddenly strode towards the direction of the Russian delegation, and all the Russian generals became nervous. Palmerston was already very happy in his heart, and he was ready to open a bottle of champagne to celebrate. Because Hina's name as a mad dog is really well known, but the development of the situation is unexpected. Still getting injections, but finally I can write something. Chapter 114 Chapter 7.5 Negotiation, Part 2. Hina grabbed Franz, and the short Franz's feet were almost off the ground. "You damn Aladdin, your conspiracy has been discovered. Tell me if you have joined forces with the Kingdom of Sardinia to instigate Serbia to attack our Austrian Empire." Hina's acting was very poor, but everyone understood his intention. The Austrian Empire wanted to kill 2 birds with 1 stone and suppress the threats on both the east and the west at the same time. The Austrian Empire may not have ambitions for the Kingdom of Sardinia, because the existence of the Kingdom of Sardinia is equivalent to a buffer zone between France and Austria. If there is no Kingdom of Sardinia, France and Austria will be in direct contact and border frictions will be more likely to occur. However, Since the Napoleonic Wars, anti-Austrian sentiment in the Kingdom of Sardinia has been rising. In particular, the Young Italy Party represented by Mazzini advocated driving Austrian and French forces out of Italy and establishing an independent kingdom on the Apennine Peninsula. This slogan was a joke in the eyes of people at the time, because Italy was just a geographical term. It is normal for Austrians to have such concerns, because there are too many Italians in Austria's sphere of influence. Once Venice, Lombardy, Tuscany, Parma, Modena, and Lucca form a unified kingdom, Austria will lose a large economic colony. Although Austria's own construction is not very good, it has extremely extensive investments in Italy. Due to its own small market, handicrafts and agricultural products in Italy are very dependent on the Austrian market. Especially after Austria opened the trade route to Egypt, the trade volume between the two sides increased significantly. The ancient port of Venice has also prospered again, and Austria's customs taxes are also rising steadily. The British don't care. Anyway, they don't feel bad about using other people's interests as chips. It's just that this touched the sensitive nerves of the French. France has always regarded Italy as its own backyard. The Kingdom of Sardinia and the southern Italian region are exactly where France's interests lie. There are inextricable ties between France and the Kingdom of Sardinia, and the existence of the Kingdom of Sardinia is to prevent Austria from further interfering in Italy. I object. This is a fabrication of facts and slander out of thin air. Guizot couldn't help it. The mad dog Hina actually bit Sardinia from Serbia. The distance between them is 1,000 kilometers, which is simply shameless. But Comrade Guizot overlooked one problem: Hina is a mad dog. So it was you French guys who were behind this. I want to duel with you. Hina threw her chapter in his hand aside and ran towards Guizot. Before coming, the members of the French delegation had already decided to win over Austria to suppress Russia and dismantle the Holy Alliance. Hina's sudden attack made the French delegation somewhat at a loss. Guizot would never duel with Hina, but he couldn't let this madman do whatever he wanted. Guizot looked at Viscount Palmerston hoping that the British would come out to mediate, but Viscount Palmerston was considering whether to disgust France by the way. You French guys are also in the same group with him, Hina roared, and this time he was not pretending. As a veteran who participated in the Napoleonic Wars, his hostility and distrust of the French prompted him to make such a judgment. This time the Russian representative also came to spirits. After all, it was thanks to the French that Russia could become the European gendarme. They support anything that makes the French unhappy. Why do you French people say this is slander? As far as I know, the mastermind of this time, the last two members of the Serbian Parliament of 17 are still in prison in Austria. We will know everything after a trial. If our Austrian friends are unwilling to do such a dirty thing, we Russians are willing to do it for them. Nasrallov's words made Guizot sweat coldly. There are still two prisoners in the Austrian prison. Their confessions are enough to affect the development of the whole situation. It's just that in this era, torture is a basic operation. As long as Austria wants, it is completely possible to make these prisoners admit that it was the Indians who instructed them to do it. You have to know that there is a hatred between Austria and France for hundreds of years. God knows whether the Austrians will use this opportunity to impose sanctions on France. A full-scale war is impossible, but it is very likely that France will be asked to give up the Kingdom of Sardinia as its sphere of influence. Sardinia is sandwiched between two major powers and has only two choices: either France or Austria. Headache. The latest novel is published first on Liu 9 Shuba. Chapter 115 Chapter 7.6 Negotiation, S3. Sardinia is sandwiched between two major powers, with only two choices: either France or Austria. Once France abandons the Kingdom of Sardinia, Austria will inevitably take advantage of the situation. France's difficulty in competing with Austria for Italy will be infinitely magnified. As the head of the world's #1 troublemaker, Palmerston feels that he can add fuel to the fire. The more chaotic the situation in Europe is, the better, and it would be best if it could be a mess. But it would be bad if Russia and Austria stood on one side. Although Austria is very weak now, if Austria really gains control of Italy, it will inevitably become another trouble. The only thing that makes the British feel relieved about Austria is its useless navy. In the previous joint operation, the Austrian warship almost hit the British warship with a shot, which was simply stunning. Only a country like Austria would drive a warship into the river as a water police boat. Those British battleships, let alone carrying out combat missions, are even a problem whether they can sail in the Danube. Moreover, Austria has a special geographical location. The narrow and long Adriatic Sea makes it completely silent for the Austrian navy as long as a small number of warships are sent to block the Strait of Otranto. No matter how much Austria invested in Venice and Trieste, it would be useless unless Austrian warships could fly out of the Strait of Otranto. I think whoever challenges the international order should be punished. What do you think? Although Palmerston was talking nonsense, no one dared to refute him. Because neither Sardinia nor Serbia involved the interests of Britain, but Britain's inclination would largely determine the final result. First of all, the Kingdom of Sardinia should continue to exist as a buffer zone between France and Austria. This sentence was equivalent to completely cutting off Austria's attempt to annex Sardinia, and at the same time warning France not to attempt to annex the Kingdom of Sardinia. Guizot had expected this situation where both sides would be hit by 50 boards. But then Palmerston still poked his sore spot. Secondly, the Kingdom of Sardinia should be an independent kingdom, not someone's sphere of influence. Not long ago, Britain did this in Egypt and successfully disintegrated France's influence in Egypt. Now in Sardinia, the British used the same trick again. The members of the French delegation were a little bit nervous. But Guizot stopped them, and even encouraged Viscount Palmerston with applause. Guizot's aim was to maintain external peace and achieve peace between France and Britain, even at the cost of insulting the national feelings of the French people. He once said, "We don't want to talk about conquest, war and revenge. Let France prosper, let it be free, rich, smart and carefree. We will not regret that it has no impact on world events." Guizot's behavior even made Palmerston wonder if he had fallen into Guizot's trap. But Guizot's colleagues had long been accustomed to Guizot's treasonous behavior. They would not provoke this old man even if they were unwilling to do so. Because the elderly Prime Minister Soult only wanted to retire peacefully and had long since stopped caring about world affairs. Now all matters of the French government are decided by François Guizot. In addition, although Guizot sold his country for glory and his servile attitude towards the British was annoying, his attitude towards corruption was connivance and even encouragement. This made these officials unable to hate him. After all, who would have trouble with money? Under Guizot's rule, those who paid more than 200 francs in taxes each year had the right to vote, and those who paid more than 500 francs had the right to be elected. He often said bluntly, "Gentlemen, get rich quickly, and then you will become voters." With this kind of leadership and this policy, France's domestic environment was once very stable and the economy developed rapidly. But the disadvantages are also obvious. As long as a fire can ignite the country. It's just that this time, France gave up the Kingdom of Sardinia as its sphere of influence, which hurt the feelings of the French nation. After all, France has invested too much emotion and capital in Sardinia. The British certainly had their own considerations for doing this. The existence of the Kingdom of Sardinia can not only disgust France but also Austria. Sardinia is sandwiched between the two powers, and the living environment is extremely bad. For the evil neighbors on the left and right, who should Sardinia ask for help? Of course, it is the British Empire. Only the British Empire can save it. Palmerston was very happy that he could continue to weaken the powers and at the same time earn a loyal younger brother for Britain. The latest novel is published on 69 Shuba. But Guizot, a man who can leave a name in history, is not given for nothing. He can give up the Kingdom of Sardinia, but he has his own plans. Tragedy is about to happen, so let's make do with it for now. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 116 Chapter 7.7 Negotiation, S4. It's okay to let our country give up the Kingdom of Sardinia as its sphere of influence, but there is a condition, Guizot said calmly. What condition? Please tell me. Palmerston seemed very calm, because the French demanded nothing more than some economic compensation. He had thought of this a long time ago and didn't care at all. Anyway, it was the Kingdom of Sardinia that paid the bill. Freedom always has to pay a price. The Ottoman Grand Vizier took the opportunity to breathe a sigh of relief. These powers seemed to be heading for the Kingdom of Sardinia. He really had no objection to ceding Serbia, but the Russians were unwilling. Sandwiched between a group of powers, Franz had mixed feelings. Thinking back to the Ottoman Empire, which was as fierce as a tiger and destroyed Hungary and besieged Vienna. Suleiman the Great swore to destroy God's world. What a courage that was. Now even if you want to cede land and seek peace, you have to look at other people's eyes. Nashirlov wanted to know the attitude of Prince Metternich, who had never spoken. After all, no one would take the words of the mad dog Hina as the attitude of the Austrian Empire. But Prince Metternich just smiled in response and didn't say much. Such a simple behavior made Nashirlov a little uneasy, because Serbia was too important to Austria. Can Prince Metternich really keep the Russian-Austrian alliance? Is the other side serious about bringing a child to negotiate? Crown Prince Alexander on his side didn't seem to be in tune. When Nashirlov was worrying about the future of the two countries, a heavy bomb quietly fell on the head of the Kingdom of Prussia. Guizot, I ask for your consent that our country establish a Franco-Belgian customs union to offset the influence of the German customs union on our country. Guizot's purpose in establishing the Franco-Belgian customs union was to counter the growing German customs union. But when it comes to the Low Countries, it touches the sensitive nerves of Britain. Franco-Belgian customs union? Is it to indirectly control Belgium and then use Belgium as a springboard to attack Britain? At this time, Palmerston really thought too much, but as long as France occupied the Low Countries, the distance to attack Britain would be greatly shortened. The French also thought too much, and the size of the German customs union at this time was far less than that of France. But we have to say that Guizot was indeed foresighted. After 1854, the size of the German customs union was close to that of mainland France. As for why the German customs union would affect France, since the Middle Ages, France has been competing with the Holy Roman Emperor for influence in southern Germany. During the Napoleonic Wars, Bavaria was Napoleon's vanguard. Until 1866, there was a secret agreement between France and Bavaria to prevent Austria from annexing southern Germany. The establishment of the German customs union led to a decline in trade between France and the southern German countries. And they became increasingly alienated. If it weren't for the constant threat of Austria, I'm afraid they would have already turned to Prussia. Viscount Palmerston could not accept the existence of the Franco-Belgian customs union. Belgium was the first to complete the Industrial Revolution on the European continent, and was even once considered one of the great powers. Moreover, the strategic location of the Low Countries directly affects the security of the British mainland. Even if he agreed, the guys in Parliament would not agree. But the French's opinion should not be ignored. Since the French currency customs union cannot be established, why not just dismantle the German customs union? Palmerston followed this line of thought and said, the customs union is so out of date. It is under the guidance of Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations that our British liberal economy can continue to grow and develop. Now I share this secret with you. Why not cancel the customs union? Implement a free economic system so that the market can be full of vitality. The abolition of tariffs is of course the most beneficial to Britain. Because Britain has a developed commodity economy, once British goods enter the European market, they will destroy the weak bourgeoisie in European countries. The liberal economic system promoted by the British is nothing more than an excuse for economic colonization and dumping of goods. Since ancient times, all countries in the world are no exception to the rule of liberalism when they are strong and trade protectionism when they are weak. Chapter 117 Chapter 7.8 Negotiation. Remove trade barriers, don't joke, Wiesel roared in his heart. There was no exquisite German craftsmanship at that time. German industrial products were synonymous with shoddy products at that time. Things were cheap, but the workmanship was quite rough and not durable. At the same time, due to the lack of brand reputation and lack of market supervision, fakes were rampant in Germany. Because fakes can enjoy the premium bonus of the brand, a large number of fakes appearing on the market at the same time brought greater difficulties to supervision. The technology in the North German region was not even as good as the Austrian Empire, which was despised by later generations. The only thing that the North German region could rely on was the large number of workers and low costs. Prussian industrial products can definitely be regarded as the best in the North German region, but they are garbage in Europe. Once the trade barriers are removed, a large number of high-quality foreign goods will influx and destroy Prussian industry. For example, Wiesel himself is both a representative of the emerging bourgeoisie and a representative of the old aristocratic landlords. Without the protection of trade barriers, Prussia's industry and agriculture will be destroyed by foreign countries. Especially for him, this is completely unacceptable. The open-door policy is not only related to Prussia's national interests, but also closely related to his own interests. At this time, Wiesel finally stood up. The German customs union is the internal affairs of the German countries, and you have no right to interfere. Then don't let your junk goods appear in our market. Comrade Guizot was obviously excited. After all, these German junk flooded the French market and affected the interests of the French bourgeoisie. Why is Prussia so afraid of the open-door policy when Germany's cheap goods have already affected France? Because Prussia's advantage is only cheap labor. The best way to get rid of Prussia is to invest and set up factories directly on its land. Directly exploit cheap labor, and then occupy Prussia's market and control its economic lifeline. Therefore, Prussia will never allow the German region to implement an open-door policy. Metternich and other Austrian conservatives have little interest in the German customs union. On the contrary, they are afraid that goods from the German region will affect their own interests, just like France. But the Austrian bourgeoisie is different from the French bourgeoisie who dare to face it. They choose to bury their heads in the soil in order to avoid the invasion of cheap goods from the German region. Instead of rushing to Prussia's homeland to directly exploit the Prussian people and eradicate them like the French bourgeoisie did. In the years that followed, due to the influence of the German customs union, the German countries had to move closer to Prussia and away from Austria. Even if the royal family was closely connected, Austria could not save the situation by bribing the top leaders of various countries at all costs. However, the German customs union at this time was just getting started. France was very interested in this and did not ask Austrian goods to occupy the entire German region. As long as the market in southern Germany could be won, Prussia would have no chance of winning in the future Prussian-Austrian war. Of course, this was not the time to deal with the German customs union. Once it was mentioned, it might arouse the vigilance of other countries. If it was considered that Austria had ambitions for the German region, it would definitely be interfered with by all parties. No country would allow a behemoth with a population of 70 million across Central Europe to emerge. Guizot was not surprised that Wissel did not make concessions this time. He insisted on establishing a legal currency customs union, which continued to touch Palmerston's sensitive nerves. His radar for predicting danger kept ringing. As the man who knows Europe best, he felt that Guizot's intentions were not to do anything. Compared with the security of the British mainland, the Near East, Serbia and Russia were all small matters. People living in the Low Countries have the right to choose their own way of life, and we should not interfere. We all don't want the Napoleonic Wars to happen again, but if someone wants to destroy the peace of Europe and the world, we, the British Empire, have an obligation to eliminate him at all costs. From the perspective of a capitalist, Guizot couldn't understand why Viscount Palmerston had such a big reaction. Although Belgium started the Industrial Revolution earlier, it had a smaller land area and limited development space. Moreover, Belgium was not as large as the German region. Britain should not oppose itself at the German customs union. He still said stubbornly, unless the German customs union is dissolved, France must establish the Franco-Belgian customs union. Wissel became more and more excited. Prussia will not dissolve the German customs union, never. You French have no right to interfere in Germany's internal affairs. At this time, the experienced Prince Metternich finally spoke. If someone wants to relive Napoleon's old dream, our Austrian Empire will never agree. Austria is the chairman of the German Confederation and has the obligation to protect the interests of the German countries. I want to remind those with ulterior motives not to think that they can get involved in Germany by having secret agreements with some southern German countries. For the sake of peace in Europe and the world, I want to reiterate that a balance of power must be maintained between major powers. Those who break the international order must be punished. The latest novel is first published on Luigi Schuba. You must know that Napoleon started his career by defeating Austria, and then occupying the German region to plunder wealth and feed back to France. Now France is in a hurry to establish the Franco-Belgian customs union, and at the same time has signed a secret agreement with the southern German countries. It can be said that France is now following the old path that Napoleon took. Every word of Metternich hits the point and is irrefutable. Metternich's words are not only for the French, Guizot, but also for the British, Palmerston, and even more for the Russians. After a few days of fighting, I feel even more serious. Chapter 118 Chapter 7.9 Negotiation, Part 2. When it comes to anti-French, the Russians can't sit still. No matter who is against France, our great Russian Empire will definitely give a good show. We defeated Napoleon once, and we can defeat him a second time. We reiterate that we, Russia, have always been committed to maintaining peace in Europe and the world, and whoever wants to destroy it will be punished. We, Russia, have always been a staunch ally of the Austrian Empire. If anyone tries to endanger our allies or provoke relations between our two countries, the Russian Empire will never let him off easily." Palmerston was very angry. Is this Russian foreign minister born in the year of the monkey? How can he climb the pole? But now he can't take care of it. The ambitions of the French must be stopped. Compared with the Russians far away, the French who are trying to march into the Low Countries are more terrifying. Wiesel also seized the opportunity. That's right, France has no right to interfere in the internal affairs of our German Confederation. Let us dissolve the customs union. This is naked aggression. He didn't know yet that no one cared about him and his German customs union. What the powers care about is how to prevent France from rising again. Guizot was also very depressed. He wondered why an anti-French alliance suddenly appeared. I just want to do more business, not to annex Belgium. Why won't the British let me go? I have already made concessions on the Sardinia issue, but I want to establish a French currency customs union, but I have been unanimously opposed by the great powers. The cunning Metternich even said that he wanted to relive the old dream of the Napoleonic era, which is simply nonsense. Comrade Guizot just wants to make money and exploit the people. For this reason, he can make concessions to the British constantly, even at the cost of hurting the feelings of the French nation. Especially on the previous issue of Egypt, he strongly opposed the Terre Cabinet and caused the Terre Cabinet to fall. Everything that France has worked hard to build in Egypt for decades was handed over to the British. Now the British are forcing the French to give up Sardinia as their sphere of influence. Guizot knew that if he couldn't bring something back this time, he would be the next to fall. But now facing this aggressive anti-French alliance, he was a little at a loss. After all, France and its neighbor Austria have had 100 years of hatred. The Russian Empire also seemed to intend to win over Austria by attacking common enemies. Prussia, on the other hand, was resentful because it had proposed to dissolve the German customs union. In Guizot's mind, Austria should be opposed to the German customs union because the Prussian-German customs union excluded Austria. In fact, the Austrian Empire had its own considerations for not joining the German customs union. First of all, Austria is different from Prussia. Austria has a vast domestic market and does not have an urgent need to find a market. Secondly, due to the destruction of the Napoleonic Wars, Austria's economy has become chaotic. The originally developed service industry, tourism and sightseeing industry have suffered huge losses and are difficult to recover. The finances of the Austrian Empire have been troubled, and it has been unable to come up with money to subsidize exports. The Austrian land nobles, especially the Hungarian nobles, are afraid that agricultural products from the German region will enter the Austrian market. This will lead to a drop in agricultural product prices, further affecting profits. As for the industrial bourgeoisie, which should have benefited the most after joining the customs union, they also opposed Austria's joining the German customs union. Because Austria's industrial development was very abnormal, strong industries such as glass manufacturing and brewing originally occupied a considerable share in the German region. Weak industries such as metal products and military industry could not withstand the impact of the market. As for the textile industry, both sides were very weak before Austria opened up the passage to Egypt. Seeing Guizot's embarrassment, Prince Metternich suggested, why not let the Kingdom of Sardinia compensate France for its losses? This was unanimously recognized by the great powers, as long as it didn't make them bleed. The latest novels are first published on the 69th book bar. Chapter 119 Chapter 8.0 Negotiation, Part 2. At this time, the Kingdom of Sardinia did not know that while eating hot pot and singing at home, a huge pot had already fallen from the sky. Comrade Guizot was still fantasizing about how much benefit France could get from Sardinia by the joint decision of the 5 major powers. 100 million francs, no, that's too cheap for the Italians. 300 million francs. Yes, in this way, the Kingdom of Sardinia can be controlled forever. France will never give up Italy so easily, but just switch to a more covert and safer way of economic colonization. But then Viscount Palmerston gave Guizot a heavy blow. I think the issue of compensation should be resolved by France and the Kingdom of Sardinia through negotiation. After all, only the French know how much money they have invested in Sardinia. Negotiated settlement means that how much money France can get is not decided by France. Instead, the two countries have to negotiate, so how can the Kingdom of Sardinia spit out everything it has eaten and double the compensation? Even if the whole country of the Kingdom of Sardinia agrees to return the French investment to France, it will not exceed 100 million francs. Moreover, They may not admit these investments, because when France assisted Sardinia, it also required the Kingdom of Sardinia to sign a secret agreement with itself to jointly fight against Austria. If Sardinia shakes out all these, I am afraid that old man Metternich will take advantage of the issue again. At this time, the British and the Austrians are fighting fiercely, and Russia is also trying to win over Austria as an ally. If Metternich really gets a handle, I don't know what kind of moth he will make. The great powers maintain the independence of Belgium and the Kingdom of Sardinia, which has already caused France to suffer too big and small losses. Guizot's purpose of coming this time is to win over the Austrian Empire to fight against Russia together and try to dismantle the Holy Alliance so that France can get rid of the shackles. It's just that the mad dog of Austria suddenly ran out to mess up, disrupting France's original plan. In order to make up for the loss of Sardinia's sphere of influence, Guizot improvised and wanted to form the Franco-Belgian customs union that he had always wanted. The result was to anger the British. Palmerston not only opposed it, but also warned France not to have ambitions for the Low Countries. At the same time, Austria and Russia also added insult to injury, and even the small Prussia dared to refuse France's request. He was even accused of being ambitious by the old man Metternich, and was asked not to interfere in German affairs. Unknowingly, Guizot found himself at a dead end. Who else can he fight for? The Ottomans? This sick man of West Asia will sooner or later be divided up by Britain, Russia and Austria. Helping him may anger Russia, and then he will really have no friends. It should have been a feast to slaughter Serbia, Russia and the Ottoman Empire, but it seems that France has become the biggest loser. Viscount Palmerston clapped his hands and said, "Okay, I think we have solved the problems of the Kingdom of Sardinia and the Low Kingdom peacefully. Now we should discuss how to deal with Serbia, the evil invader. That's right, the accident is over, and it's time to eat the main course." However, no matter how Hainaut bites, Austria still has to save face as a great empire. This time Serbia did not declare war. And also burned, killed, looted and destroyed everywhere in Austria. For the sake of the face of a great power, Serbia must be punished, but Serbia is a poor country. The only thing that could be compensated to Austria was land and population. As a Catholic country, Austria could not hold slaves. Even if Metternich gave up the compensation in order to preserve the Russo-Austrian alliance, he would not be able to explain it when he returned home. His successor would definitely seek compensation in order to keep his position. The next peace conference would not be held in the snowy St. Petersburg, but in London. That was Palmerston's home ground. For quite a long time afterwards, there would be short updates like this. Chapter 120 Chapter 8.1 Bosnia. Our country is willing to give up Serbia's sovereignty and transfer the rights to the Austrian Empire. Franz immediately responded to Palmerston's call. He no longer hesitated and just wanted to end it all quickly. Because he saw the end of France, he really didn't know what these powers were thinking. The fear of unknown things prompted Franz to give up the right to bargain. He also saw the strength of Britain, and the threat of Russia had been thrown behind his mind. Because he knew that Russia would not let the Ottomans go. Even if he compromised this time, it would be useless. It would be better to find a big backer and fight hard, and if Austria really did what Palmerston said. Because of a small Serbia, the two evil dragons coveting the Ottoman land could turn against each other. That would be great. But Franz seemed to have forgotten that the Ottoman Empire was just a dish in the eyes of the powers, and his opinion didn't matter at all. "Aladdin, do you have a say here?" He opened his mouth again. This made Franz feel very embarrassed. It turned out that the real sadness of a weak country was not that there were only two choices, to allow or not to allow. Instead, they don't even have the right to choose to agree or disagree. Franz is deeply touched now, but all he can do is to be patient. After all, the great powers now believe that Serbia's attack on the Austrian Empire is closely related to the Ottoman suzerain. Facing Hainaut's repeated pressure, they can only remain restrained. Otherwise, the Austrians will take advantage of the situation and it may turn into a Turkish-Austrian war. It is not certain whether the British will stand on their side at that time, because for the British, the biggest enemy at this stage is Russia. Although suppressing Austria can reduce the number of competitors in the Near East, it will also indirectly help Russia. Once Austria completely turns to Russia, Britain will not be able to stop Russia's expansion unless Britain is ready for a full-scale war. Franz twitched his mouth and squeezed out a smile that was uglier than crying. "Respected General Hainaut, I am just expressing our country's attitude. We are indeed unaware of the aggressive behavior of Serbia, our vassal state. Now the Sultan has given me full authority to handle this matter. It is in the interests of both sides to cede Serbia to your country. You say to cede whatever you want? Wouldn't it be embarrassing for our Austrian Empire? Hinault continued. Palmerston was also very depressed. What was going on? What was going on? Austria had other plans? But except for Serbia, the surrounding area was a piece of rotten land. Did it intend to take the two principalities on the Danube? The two principalities on the Danube were Wallachia and Moldavia. These two principalities bordered Austria and were blood-related to the Transylvanians. These two countries were also within the power radiation range of Austria and were the throats of Russia's southward advance. Once the two principalities were lost, Russia could only go south from the Caucasus. Russia that chose to go south from the Caucasus would lose the advantage of the people. Because there were a large number of Orthodox Christians in the Balkans, and going south from the Caucasus was almost entirely the territory of the. Palmerston thought it was a good idea and asked casually, "Where does your country want to occupy?" "Bosnia," Franz said. Hinault looked back at Prince Metternich, and the old man nodded. "Didn't you hear?" Bosnia, Palmerston, Ferzak, and Nasrallah all asked in confusion at the same time. Bosnia, because this was a completely rotten piece of land, and they really couldn't think of any reason why the Austrian Empire wanted it. Chapter 121 Chapter 8.2 Bosnia, Medium. How bad is the land in Bosnia? More than 90% of the land in this country is rugged mountains, and the crop yield is less than one-fifth of that in Vojvodina province. Industrial and commercial trade is almost non-existent, and the largest source of taxation is the nomads in the mountains. Moreover, the mountain people here are wild and unruly, fierce and warlike, and they often revolt and make trouble. The Ottoman Empire has sent troops to encircle and suppress them many times, but they have all returned without success. The reason is simple. The mountain people naturally understand the Eastern War thinking. When the enemy advances, I retreat. When the enemy stays, I harass. When the enemy is tired, I fight. When the enemy retreats, I chase. Under the guidance of this tactical thinking that is hundreds of years ahead of the West, the backward army of the Ottoman Empire was naturally beaten to pulp. Among them, Montenegro is the only country in the entire Balkans that has not been conquered by the Ottomans. Montenegro is like a nail nailed into the territory of the Ottoman Empire, making it impossible for the Ottomans to pull it out, press it down, and suffer. Montenegrin warriors also became famous for this, and the Montenegrin mercenaries and Swiss mercenaries have the same resounding reputation. But the record in foreign wars was equally tragic. In the previous Battle of Nordsavie, the performance of the Montenegrin mercenaries was hard to describe. Although they looked very fierce, they had no power to fight back against the deep trenches and high walls of Nordsavie and Karini's direct troops. Almost all of the 500 Montenegrin mercenaries who participated in the attack on Nordsavie were killed, and the same tragedy happened to the Montenegrin mercenaries many times. But there are still people who believe in the combat effectiveness of the Montenegrin army, and even Austria hired a large number of Montenegrin troops to quell the rebellion in 1848. It's just that there was no outstanding performance in the Battle of Vienna. Instead, after the war, civilians were plundered and abused crazily. Among all the provinces of the Ottoman Empire, Bosnia is the only region with negative taxes. This rotten land not only cannot collect taxes, but also requires a lot of expenditure every year to maintain occupation. Every governor of Bosnia did not think about how to develop but focused on nurturing the enemy. Scrape a little oil and water from the finances of the Ottoman Empire, and leave the development and public security of the region to fate. The Ottoman Empire even proposed the idea of making Bosnia independent because of its tight finances. Firkat was very happy to accept this proposal from the Austrians. It would not offend Russia, and it would give up the cancer of Bosnia. If the Austrians could destroy Montenegro, it would be a triple blessing. Firkat could not hide his inner joy, and his face was already full of smiles. But the happiest person was not him, but someone else. No matter what the Austrian Empire gave up Serbia for, Nasrallah was the happiest one. As long as Austria did not touch Serbia, it would be easy to report to the Tsar. The Tsar had only two requirements for this negotiation. The first was to keep Serbia, and the second was to maintain good relations with Austria. Now that Austria did not want Serbia, he had breathed a sigh of relief. And then he hoped that the compensation demanded by Austria would not be too harsh. After all, Serbia had been seriously injured this time, and it would take at least 10 years to recover. If Austria opened its mouth again, Serbia would not be able to bear it. In order to prevent Austria from controlling Serbia economically, Russia would of course pay for the shortfall. Of course, Russia was also well prepared. The Tsar had already conscripted 50,000 grey animals to help Serbia with post-war reconstruction. These laborers were not given to Serbia for free. The goal was of course to control Serbia again. When someone is happy, someone else is sad. Palmerston is very depressed now. He understands Europe, but he can't understand the Austrians' operation. Why bring a child to this negotiation between countries? He still messes up at the critical moment. Why did Austria choose this rotten land when there are so many lands around it? Chapter 122, Chapter 8.3 Bosnia, Part 2. Although this piece of rotten land in Bosnia is on the map of the Balkans, it poses no threat to the Ottoman Empire. It can't compete with Russia at all. On the contrary, this rotten land will consume the energy of the Austrian Empire and delay Austria's steps to the Near East. Because this piece of land is adjacent to the sea in the west, Serbia in the east, and the sturdy Montenegro in the south. Needless to say, Montenegro has been surrounded by the Ottomans for 5 centuries and has not been conquered. It is a hard bone to chew. The reason why Serbia in the west is called the key to the Balkans is its unique geographical location. The only plain area in Bosnia is close to Serbia, but the part of Serbia that connects with Bosnia is easy to defend and difficult to attack. The Užice fortress is located at the mouth of the valley between the Bofulan mountain and the Zlatibor mountain. It can be said that one man guards the pass and 10,000 men cannot open it. This rotten land is difficult to defend itself, let alone attack Serbia. If Austria really takes this rotten land, then Austria may not be counted on in the future. Wouldn't his purpose of winning over Austria to suppress Russia be in vain? Palmerston thought so, but he was not discouraged. Austria's taking over Bosnia was a dead end, because he knew Austria's financial situation clearly. How could a country that couldn't even pay the interest have the ability to develop new territories? How could a country that was controlled by capitalists have the strength to maintain order? Although Bosnia has a population of only 500,000, more than half of them are Bosniaks. And Austria's decline from prosperity began with a religious war. The Bosniak people in Bosnia will definitely resist Austrian rule, and there is hatred between Austria and Serbia. The local Serbs may not obey Austrian rule either. The local Serbs and Bosniaks in Bosnia together account for more than 80% of the total population. The Fars Mountain people are not easy to deal with. The British think so, because their neighbors, the Scots and the Gurkhas in the mountains of Nepal, are both strong fighters. And the recent experience in Afghanistan, the garrison in Kabul has increased to 21,000 people. But it still couldn't clear the remnants of the rebels, and the military expenditure soared year by year. The voices of the domestic opposition became louder and louder. If it weren't for that damn idiot who made a big bet, Palmerston should have been a member of the opposition. In this era, the cost of suppressing bandits in the mountains is simply a bottomless pit. Palmerston also vaguely felt the end of the British Army, but he didn't want to believe it. After all, the British Empire defeated the world's former largest country with only 20,000 people not long ago. But this time the goddess of victory did not seem to favor the British Empire. The desert was full of rebels, and the British Army could only occupy a few isolated cities. The troops that went out to suppress bandits often returned without success, and their own supply lines were often attacked. Austria is about to face the same situation, and the situation may be worse. After all, once the cannon sounds, gold is worth a lot of money. I don't know how many pairs of eyes in Austria are staring at this piece of fat meat. Since Austria can't be relied on, Palmerston immediately changed his position to support the Ottoman Empire. Now all he has to do is to try his best to prevent Russia and Austria from weakening the Ottoman Empire. In fact, Franz did not want to weaken the Ottoman Empire too much, because the long-term existence of the Ottoman Empire could distract the energy of various countries so that Austria could develop with peace of mind. Palmerston needed the Ottoman Empire to stop Russia's invasion from the south, and Austria also needed the Ottoman Empire to maintain the Russian-Austrian alliance. France was also ready to find a way to break the current diplomatic deadlock on the Ottoman Empire. Prussia, far away, also did not want the Ottoman Empire to disappear, because without the Ottoman Empire as a punching bag, the 3 countries of Russia, France and Austria around it would target their own fat meat again. Nishirlov also felt that if Austria could withdraw because it could not digest Bosnia, the competition for the Ottoman Empire would be the best outcome between the 2 countries. Franz knew that as long as Bosnia and Herzegovina could be digested, Austria would still be an ally that Russia and Britain competed for. It was still very comfortable to be a double champion. So Austria must digest Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Franz has been planning for this for many years. It may take 10 or even 20 years, but time will prove that it is all worth it. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelis. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 123, Backfire, Part 1. The Austrian Empire proposed a compensation of 100 million guilders, and at the same time opened up foreign trade and enjoyed the same unilateral tariff privilege of 5% as Britain, Russia and other countries, and demanded that the Ottoman Empire cede Bosnia and Herzegovina. The Ottoman Empire had long been accustomed to the opening of foreign trade and unilateral most favored nation treatment. The tariff fell from 12% to 5%, but the customs revenue of the Ottoman Empire did not decrease but increased. Therefore, they welcomed Austria's economic invasion. Because even if there were no Austrian goods, the market was full of various foreign goods. Anyway, too many lice do not itch, and too many debts do not worry. In addition, the Ottoman Empire's gems, carpets, high-end leather and other luxury goods are also needed by Austria, and the Ottoman Empire will not necessarily suffer losses by doing business with Austria. Moreover, a vigorous westernization movement is being carried out in the Ottoman country, which requires a lot of funds. It is not a bad thing for the Ottoman Empire that the Austrians demanded the opening of trade at this time. The Ottoman westernization movement and the previous Egyptian westernization movement both gave priority to the development of military industry, and invested very little in civilian industry. Because the main goal of the Ottoman Empire at that time was to resist foreign humiliation, everything else could be put aside. The reason is very simple, of course. The civil and military systems of the Ottoman Empire are far superior to those of the West in everything, except firearms. If the Ottoman Empire wants to become stronger, it is better to learn foreign weapons. If it wants to learn foreign weapons, it is better to find the tools to make them and learn their methods, instead of using all their people, only by developing military-heavy industry first, and then developing other aspects of the country after having strength and foundation. It is not too late. In fact, it is difficult to say whether this approach is right or wrong. Although a large area of Bosnia and Herzegovina was lost, the conflict with Russia was avoided from escalating, and at the same time, the British promised in Austria, a new trading partner, were obtained. Franz was very happy. This was simply a great diplomatic victory. It was just that the compensation of 100 million guilders was a bit too much. Of course, this was just to give room for bargaining. Franz did not take the compensation seriously. In fact, Metternich did not want it much. At this time, Viscount Palmerston suddenly jumped out. "It is the Serbs who attacked you. You should ask Serbia for compensation. The Ottoman Empire has ceded the two territories of Bosnia and Herzegovina to you, which has shown enough sincerity. I always think that Austria is a civilized country and should not be so greedy." Palmerston dared to say this, and his self-confidence came from the incomparable strength of Britain. As the foreign minister of the world's most powerful country, he is indeed qualified to be arrogant. What a bullshit madness, it is just a chihuahua in front of the British Empire. But his opponent is the experienced Prince Metternich, a man who was once known as the Prime Minister of Europe. Facing the aggressive Palmerston, Prince Metternich seemed a little bored. He began to miss the French cripple, who was a real diplomat. "Dear Viscount, every grievance has its perpetrator. The Ottoman Empire is the suzerain of Serbia and should bear the corresponding responsibility. If the Ottoman Empire does not pay the compensation, the Austrian Empire will not give up all means, including but not limited to war." Palmerston suspected that he had heard it wrong and said it subconsciously. "What did you say?" We Russia have always been the most loyal ally of the Austrian Empire. It is our Russia's unshirkable responsibility to safeguard the interests of our allies. Nishchurlov would not miss this opportunity. Chapter 124 Chapter 9.1 Overdoing It, Part 2. He didn't know whether Austria would decline because it couldn't swallow Bosnia. He only knew that if Russia and Austria joined hands, no one could resist them in the Balkans. The British Empire wouldn't work either, unless they could sail their ships to the shore. At least they couldn't let Austria fall to the British side. Palmerston was very annoyed. He originally wanted Austria to weaken the Ottoman Empire as little as possible, and at the same time try to force Austria to swallow Serbia. Or at least arouse Russia's suspicion and distract Russia from defending Austria. But he never expected that the always weak Metternich would be so resolute and decisive this time. Nasrallov's intervention made things more complicated, and he seemed to be driven to the opposite side of Austria. Behind him was the world's first power, the British Empire, but Austria was a standard land power. Austria's narrow coastline made the naval forces that blockaded Austria very prosperous, but at the same time, the narrow coastline was also very conducive to defense. Venice and Trieste are not Alexandria or Belgrade, with hundreds of turrets distributed along the narrow coastline. Even the new ironclad ships could not withstand such artillery fire. As for the blockade of Austria to fight a trade war, Austria's largest overseas trading partner is Egypt. However, the trade volume accounts for a small proportion in Austria's trade system, and is not as high as the German region in the British trade system. As for directly fighting Austria and Russia on land, this is not in the interests of Britain. Even if it wins, I am afraid that Britain's global empire will collapse. The French and Americans will not miss such a good opportunity and will definitely compete with Britain for colonies around the world. If things go wrong, an anti-British alliance will emerge, and then Britain will follow in France's footsteps. Besides, it is simply a pipe dream to defeat Austria and Russia at the same time in the Balkans. The two countries can use rivers to continuously transport troops to the Balkans, while Britain will have to pay a huge price to transport troops from its homeland or India. Britain's only advantage over Austria and Russia is its maritime power, but the Balkans cannot be saved, and only the Anatolia region can be defended. By then, when the Russian army moves south from the Caucasus, the entire Ottoman Empire and even the entire Middle East will become Russian territory. It was obviously in France's interest to stay out of the matter. If the British were stuck in the Balkan quagmire, France could take the opportunity to sell supplies to both sides, and even rebuild its colonial empire while Britain was weak. Thinking of this, Guizot, who had suffered a series of setbacks before, suddenly felt like the clouds were clearing and the sun was shining. Chapter 125 Chapter 9.2 Backfire, Part 2. Is this the feeling of grasping victory? Not bad, Guizot thought to himself. Soon, I will get a promotion and a raise, become the Prime Minister of the Empire, marry a beautiful and rich woman, and live with my wife forever. But getting promoted, getting rich, and having a dead wife is not bad either. I am a little excited when I think about it. It was just the expressions of Guizot and several French representatives that made the anti-French alarms of the people present beep. Palmerston was a qualified diplomat. He changed his words immediately when he saw that things were not going to work. After all, these indemnities were not paid by the British Empire. They just didn't want Austria to benefit while the Ottoman Empire was burdened with heavy debts. After all, this is a dispute between your country and the Ottoman Empire. I offended you just now. I just hope that your country can reduce the amount of indemnity a little for God's sake. In fact, Metternich's bottom line was 20 million guilders. Of course, the more the better if possible. But if it was less than 20 million guilders, he would have no way to explain it back home. At the same time, due to the Rothschild family's propaganda, people in China thought that Austria could beat the Ottoman Empire at the negotiating table. Austria was filled with a cheerful atmosphere. The people and nobles were looking forward to the glory of the empire, and the merchants hoped to gain more markets and privileges. Everyone thought that Austria would take back Belgrade, but if it did so, the only consequence was the breakdown of the Russo-Austrian alliance, and Austria had to spend a huge amount of money to defend against its powerful neighbor in the east. At the same time, in order to seek possible allies, it had to please the British, and even the French and Prussians. Even so, Austria could not withstand the wrath of Russia, and the entire east would be turned into a sea of fire. And it was still unknown whether Hungary, the traitor, would turn against it at that time. If it went wrong, it would be another siege of Vienna, and the years of keeping a low profile after the Napoleonic Wars would be destroyed. From then on, the Austrian Empire would be burdened with even heavier debts, and at the same time, in order to prevent Russia's revenge, it had to follow Britain's footsteps and be a pawn. As an ally of Britain, it was difficult to have a good end, and that would be the fate of the Austrian Empire. In order to avoid this fate, Austria had to give up Serbia, a delicious poison. As for the compensation, of course, the more the better. It was rare to have Russian support, so France and Prussia remained silent. The British were also wavering in their stance, wondering whether or not to save the Ottoman Empire. The one who suffered the most at this time was Furkak. His previous joy had turned into resentment. According to Furkak's previous experience, the other party's offer of 100 million was just for bargaining. At most, 30 million would do, and as long as he cried a little harder, the other party might be able to accept 10 million. And this compensation would usually be taken care of by the other party's bank. The Ottoman Empire's debt was just a formality, and at most it could be mortgaged to pay taxes in some regions. Even foreign investment and trade tariffs would far exceed this number. But with Palmerston's commotion, the Austrians just took advantage of Russia's momentum to put pressure on the Ottoman Empire. The British, who had caused this incident, actually stood idly by. Prussia had no reason to object, and the French seemed to be planning something bigger. 50 million guilders. Viscount Palmerston wants you to know how much disaster this Serbian invasion has caused to the Vojvodina province on our border. Hundreds of thousands of people have been displaced, and more than 1,000 houses have been destroyed. Metternich was talking nonsense, but no one could prove that he was lying. When he heard 50 million guilders, Furkak's heart sank. This was nearly twice the worst-case scenario expected. If this were true, he would probably be beheaded when he returned. Damn white-haired bald man, Englishman, long tongue, Furkak kept cursing in his heart, but it was no use. Palmerston didn't want to continue to entangle with the European Prime Minister over the affairs of the Ottoman Empire. Because he seemed to understand the experiences of his predecessors, the entire peace conference seemed to be under the control of Metternich. Whenever someone wanted to jump out of the control of the European Prime Minister, they would get into trouble. Then Grand Vizier, do you have any objections? Metternich said with a pleasant face. Mr. Prime Minister, 50 million guilders is too much? Our country's economic situation does not allow it at all. Furkak had a bitter face. Aladdin, are you going to reject our peace proposal? Hina jumped out at the right time and added fuel to the fire. Furkak looked around and sighed when no one paid attention to him. I accept it. To be honest, 50 million guilders is simply not affordable for the Ottoman Empire's financial situation. But after Palmerston's commotion, asking for 30 million guilders in compensation is a bit of a slap in the face. The latest novels are first published on the 69th book bar. Wiesel did not want the Ottoman Empire to pay too much compensation, because the money would go to Austria. This is not good news for Prussia. But seeing how Metternich used the interests of various countries to suppress Britain and France so badly, he thought that he was not as good as Palmerston and Guizot, so he simply did not participate in such a fight. Although Nasrallah did not want Austria to get too much compensation, he could still accept it if the Ottoman Empire could be weakened. Guizot regretted that Palmerston did not go all the way and fight Austria and Russia to the end. But he smelled a business opportunity, something that excited him even more. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.